agenda? If not, can we approve the agenda? So, second. Dave, there we go. Kurt moved and Phil seconded. Call for the vote. Approved. The agenda is approved. Are there any announcements? I just have one request, and that is, and I'm violating it.
When you're speaking, be sure and turn your mic on. As I have just demonstrated, it doesn't work too well if it's turned off. We're looking at the approval of the minutes for July 21st and July 28th. Has everyone had a chance to look at them? Do we have any issues, any questions, comments? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Approve them both.
Okay, second?
Second.
Kurt seconded. Call for a vote. Approve? They are approved. That moves us, we have no reports pending that I'm aware of. No old business. Move straight to our interviews. Dr. Warren, Dr. Keene, if you'd like to lead off.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioners, for having me before your hearing to discuss the coroner's office. For the record, I'm Dr. Warren Keene, and I'm in the elected coroner for Kootenai County, and I'm in the midway through my second term. For those of you who don't know what the coroner really does, by statute, I'm the one that's responsible for determining the manner and cause of death for an individual who was unattended by medical personnel during their last illness. And so I don't take care of everybody, just the ones that are unattended come under my jurisdiction. I'm also charged with signing off on all the cremations that occur in the county so that something doesn't slip under the wire because once a body's been cremated, you can't exhume it and do any kind of scientific studies on it. The number of cases go up every year. Our demographics are getting older. I've heard it's a gray tsunami that's coming to Kootenai County. And so all of us are getting busy, as well as the hospital district and all the clinics. Last year, we handled over 1,740 cases. Most of those are cremations. The rest were, unfortunately, homicides, suicides, accidents, natural deaths, and then some are beyond determining what caused it. That's a very few number. I'm retired from the active practice of medicine, but during my 40 years of medicine, I've always brought my experience, training, and education to improve the area where I'm working, and I brought that with me to the coroner's office. At this time, all of my deputies are certified to national standards. They're all board certified by the American Board of Medical Legal Death Investigators. Fortunately, in Kootenai County, we have been blessed by having physicians be the coroner for almost the majority of the last 70 years. Dr. Woods was a coroner for a long time. I'm sure all of you remember Dr. West. And then I the BOCC during budget negotiations. I ask for lots of stuff and they say no. And then once those parameters are set out, I run my office very efficiently and effectively. The coroners in the state, there's 44, and we're all required to have continuing education because a lot of the coroners aren't necessarily physicians. I believe there's only 2 or 3 of us, of the coroners, that are physicians. The other ones are, for the most part, funeral directors who, of course, are used to seeing deceased persons and can identify suspicious activities and those kind of things. But the statute puts money away so that the coroners can be educated in the latest death investigation as well as the latest kind of trends that are going on. There's a international meeting that our association sends deputies and coroners to that's in Las Vegas every year. We're going to have a state association meeting here in September for all the coroners that want to come up for our education. We put on about 12 to 15 hours of education for the coroners, as well as do our state meeting and that kind of stuff and develop budgets. Some of your questions were, who manages the frontline people? And my office only has 3.5 full-time equivalents. So both my chief deputy and myself take care of people in the office to make sure that the records are being maintained, that we get out to the scene and help the law enforcement take care of any of the questions that are going on. I'm proud to use my medical knowledge to determine when a forensics autopsy is needed. Right now, we autopsy every fatal car crash just because of all the legalistic things that are going on with all of those. Not every unattended death needs an autopsy. I many times will get pages and pages of medical records, determine what illnesses the person has, possibly do a toxicology and an external examination, and then that saves the taxpayers' money so that we are running things efficiently. It's hard to recruit people into this line of work, and so we can take out an ad in the MySpace or wherever you want to put it, but I've talked to many, many people who I would think would be interested in, that mystery of what causes a person to die and solve the final puzzle. But there really aren't a lot of them out there, and so as I talk to them, they'll give me, yeah, talk to me later, or no, I'm not interested, or maybe I am kind of interested. And that's how I usually recruit for my office. The three of us that are in there now all have medical backgrounds. The part-time person is a paramedic, retired from the firefighters, and it's kind of rejuvenated his career. He'd said if he'd have known about this kind of a thing before, he probably would not have been a paramedic. He would have been a death investigator. So those are the people that we get into my office, and we pretty much stick as close as we can to the possible budget. I think if you wanted someone who did not have my background, that you would be subjecting the taxpayer to a much higher bill. Some of the retired law enforcement people from California come up here and they say, you're not autopsying everybody, and not everybody that dies up here needs to have an autopsy. There are some that absolutely do, but for the medical record and an examination, you can determine that. I have $157,000 for a budget to do autopsies. Currently, just the autopsy itself without any extra test runs about $3,000, so between $3,000 and $4,000 an autopsy. I am glad that we're able to return some money every year to the budget. My predecessor wasn't able to do that and was $100,000 over budget in the first 2 years of that office. So I think that you're almost going to get what you pay for if you have a hired person to come in and do this. I've saved the taxpayers a lot of money. If we had to autopsy everybody that died because somebody wasn't watching the taxpayers' money, I think the $157,000 would probably be $1 million. So I think our current form of government is very efficient. From my office, we're very efficient, we're effective, we get all of the work done, we help law enforcement, and we help get all the information to Barry's office so that prosecutions can take place. And you'd have to ask all of the other elected officials if their office was efficient or not. But I think that this current forum, we do a very good job and we have great people in it. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Barry, would you like to give us
Sure.
opening speech?
Yeah, my name is Barry McHugh. I'm the county prosecutor. I guess by way of full disclosure, I should let you know that Commission Member Bryant Bushling has worked for me full-time in the past and is currently working for me part-time, much to my office's advantage. And also, we're hiring his daughter as a deputy prosecuting attorney here in the coming couple months, and she's an excellent student, and I know she'll do a great job in her office. But I've been in my current position since January of 2009. It's gone through some changes, and I'll just give you a quick summary of what we do and who does it. My criminal division has the majority of the employees between 30 and 40, and it's responsible for prosecuting all felony offenses in the county, misdemeanor offenses outside of the cities of Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, and Rathdrum, and now and soon Hayden. All child protection, all juvenile offenses, all involuntary mental commitment matters. So we're very busy. That's where the majority of my attorneys are, approximately 22. I also have a civil division, and when I was elected the first time, the civil division was actually under the supervision of the Board of County Commissioners, and that was historically based on a dispute that took place long before between the then Board of County Commissioners and the county prosecutor, and by way of an agreement, the civil division went under the Board of County Commissioners, which from my perspective was inappropriate. First of all, it should be part of the prosecutor's office statutorily, but also from a conflict of interest basis. Makes it very difficult, I think, for attorneys to be supervised by non-attorneys who don't necessarily aren't bound by ethical constraints that we are as attorneys. And so it also created, I think, some tension with regards to the other elected officials feeling like, well, the civil attorneys are working for the Board of County Commissioners, so are we sure we're going to get unbiased and objective evaluation of legal issues when they come up, since the Board of County Commissioners controls their pay and supervises them. And so when I took office, the then board turned them back over to me, and they've been under my supervision since. A couple of years after I took office, the Juvenile Diversion Division, which was also at the time under the supervision of the Board of County Commissioners, was transferred to my office. What had happened, just by way of explanation, is that the longtime director was retiring, and I think she and I shared an appreciation for the work that they do, which is basically keeping kids who have gotten themselves into trouble out of the court system. And so they're engaged in sort of an informal probation. Obviously, diversion, the idea of diversion is to divert them back onto a path that's going to lead them to be successful adults without having to go through the court system if their crimes are relatively minor, and there's an evaluation that's made that they can successfully complete that program along with the cooperation of their parents. It's a volunteer program. Anyone can refuse it, but there's many kids who have gone through that program successfully, and it's a great program. Then probably about, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, the Human Resources, which again was under the Board of County Commissioners, was transferred to my office for supervision purposes. And there's, I think, some different reasons for that. But really at the time, I think the motivation was the director of HR felt like she and her staff were being asked to do a lot of individual projects by the board that was in office at the time, and she was getting really frustrated to the point where I felt like, or she felt like she might leave her position because it was very difficult for her to manage her office while getting pulled in 3 different directions by the commissioners that were in place at the time. And I shouldn't say in 3 different directions, because it may not have been that every single commissioner was asking for a lot of individual projects. But in any event, that came under my supervision. There's about 5 employees in HR, 5 employees in juvenile diversion, and in the civil division there's 5 attorneys and 2 support staff. So that's the operation. I've tried to go through the questions that we were provided to give you whatever information may be helpful to you. You ask who has the big picture of where the county should be going and what the priorities are. And I think each of us as elected officials have a vision for where our office should be going. But the reality is I can have all the vision in the world, but if I don't have the dollars to do it, I may not be able to achieve many of those goals. And so really the bigger picture is the Board of County Commissioners. I mean, when they control the budget, they control every one of us in terms of what we can do, what programs we can expand on, what projects we can take on, and all of that sort of thing. So really when it comes to you know, the big picture, I think the board, because we go to the board and ask for things and share with them our, where we would like to go, they have that information. And whether they agree with me or not, I think that they at least have a sense for, you know, where I would like to go, where the sheriff would like to go, and every other elected official. As far as strengths and weaknesses, you know, I think one of the strengths is that each one of us as elected officials is directly accountable to the voters. And I can tell you I take that very seriously, and I think about it when I make decisions. And I think that that is a strength. I think that it certainly weighs on me when making decisions about, you know, my office, especially in the criminal division. It's, you know, it's a pretty, I want to say, easy task from a from sort of a moral and ethical point of view, in that our charge is, you know, to do the right thing and prosecute cases and try to keep the community safe. But that still, you're still accountable to the taxpayers, and I take my budget very seriously and try to make sure that I don't ask for more than I need, for sure. Another strength, I think, frankly, is that the BOCC's budget authority, in some regard, I believe, slows budget growth. And I'll talk about why that's a good thing and a bad thing in terms of the budget authority. But the reality is they've got to weigh the competing requests at the end of the day. And as I view it, a lot of times their ability to get reelected is in some regard based on how the budget goes and how taxes are levied, and it seems to be a really big issue. It's not the every issue for sure, but I think it's a consistent issue with the Board of County Commissioners. And I will say that, you know, I view that also as a negative, their budget authority. If I was, you know, king, I would want my own budget authority. And I think that that would be a better way for me to be accountable to the taxpayers, is by way of saying, this is what I need, and I'm taking responsibility for that request in terms of taxes, and you can choose to elect me or don't elect me again, in part because I have that decision-making authority. And so I think in some ways it's unfair, and yet it's the reality that the board has that budget authority and they're held responsible for all of that. But that's the way it is, and I don't see that particularly changing. As far as weaknesses, one of the things that I've experienced is just the turnover at the Board of County Commissioner level, and that's pretty common. There's only 3 commissioners, and I'm not saying that to mean I believe that that ought to be changed, but the reality is in some years you have 1 commissioner who has experience on the board and 2 brand new commissioners like we did this year. And so they work really hard. That's my experience, is that they work really hard to get up to speed on what they need to know. But the reality is, you know, they don't necessarily have an in-depth knowledge coming in as to all the operations of the county and the history that exists regarding you know, what decisions have been made in the past and why, because they weren't part of the board. What about a request that was made, you know, 5 years ago by the clerk, and now he's revisiting that request? You don't necessarily know kind of what got discussed, and so I think that the turnover can be an issue because without that sort of continuity, it makes it difficult, and they have to rely on, in some regards, the people who have been here longer, and there are certainly long-term county employees who are involved on matters involving their own offices as well as others. And so another weakness from my perspective is that, you know, in terms of hiring, you know, the board controls salaries from the people in my office. Again, I would like to have if I had my preference, I'd say, give me my budget and let me figure out how to operate my office most efficiently and effectively with the money that you give me. They give me some flexibility, but again, I think that's a challenge for me when it comes to spending the money the way that I think most effective in terms of employees and things that I have to spend money on in my budget. And I think that in as much as the board has budget responsibility and there are just ongoing decisions relating to the budget, sometimes I've had the experience of feeling like it's, you know, the squeaky wheel that gets the attention and in some occasions gets the money. And so sometimes you hear about, you know, somebody going to the board and getting additional funding for this, that, or the other thing. And I think that breeds a little bit of, you know, people holding on to their money or seeking additional money because if they're not doing it, you know, they're losing an opportunity because other people are. And so I can't really give you a specific example on that, but it's just something that I think can be a challenge for the board in terms of, and for other electeds, feeling like they might be, you know, missing out on some opportunities. So as far as collaboration and coordination, of course, there's the budget aspect with the board. You know, we work with the Sheriff's Office a lot because they're one of our law enforcement agencies that brings us cases, and so we always work on them in a close relationship. Because the clerk's office staffs the court, we're working with them on how things operate. Work with Dr. Keen's office on cases of interest. And then just generally, for example, you know, we have a monthly meeting, elected officials, and that's where things get discussed. Things that may impact all of us. The board may have a policy matter that impacts all of us, and so there's certainly ongoing collaboration on a monthly basis in that regard. As far as education and keeping up to speed, Prosecutors Association statewide has annual conferences. The National District Attorneys Association has conferences around the country. So I go to those, my deputies go to those. The county has management-related sponsored seminars that or courses that are held here, which is nice, that I have the opportunity to attend. And then ICREMP, our, you know, the insurance carrier basically for the county, also provides us training opportunities. As far as who manages, so I have a chief deputy who acts in my stead when I'm either unavailable or if I'm out of the state, something like that. I have a criminal chief who acts as a supervisor in the criminal division. I have a director for human resources and a director for juvenile diversion. As far as hiring, it depends. As far as my chief deputies and my managers goes, for, you know, criminal chief and chief deputy, I really like to hire within as a policy. And so it would be pretty unusual, and I don't believe I've ever advertised for that kind of position because I have enough staff to hopefully have people who understand the way that I want the office to operate and are on board with that idea and can take on additional, you know, managerial type of responsibilities. Juvenile diversion, the last director we hired was based on an application process, and HR was pretty different from the perspective that one of the complaints I heard from other elected officials when I got here was that the commissioners didn't include other elected officials in the selection process of the HR director, and they felt like that's a person that's, you know, supposed to be helping us all, so why don't we have a hand in the selection of that director? And so that was something that I did when we had to select the HR director, is that I invited each elected official to pick somebody to participate in that hiring process. And I thought that went really well, and we've got a great HR director, so, you know, that was a good thing. As far as operational pitfalls, you know, being hired versus being elected, I think inherently there's an issue with the board supervising my position. And, you know, we're supposed to be providing the board legal advice on the civil side that should be objective, and it should be fair to every elected official. And you don't want to get into that position where people are wondering whether that's the case. And occasionally, you know, we do have conflicts, and so we'll have one elected official maybe disagreeing with another over an issue. And I think, I can't remember if it was Steve Matheson or somebody else talked about that can happen, and we try to provide advice with the idea that we'll give you both advice if you're amenable to hearing it, but if there is an ongoing dispute, we're out, because we have an ongoing relationship with each elected official that we have to maintain, and so we can't really represent one against the other, you know, if there was an actual litigation. That's one of the pitfalls, I think, is that we have to maintain some independence from basically our clients on the civil side. If my position was hired, again, I don't think that I would be as directly accountable to the citizens as I am right now. And not to say that if it was me, I wouldn't certainly try to do that. But the reality is, if someone's mad at my office and I'm supervised by whether it's a county manager or the Board of County Commissioners, you know, they're going to hear about it. If they're not happy with my decision making, they're going to go over my head. And I think it's really important to have someone in my position who has that ultimate, you know, decision-making authority. And there are some, you know, difficult decisions that we have to make in terms of charging cases or not charging cases on the criminal side. I've kind of gone back and forth on whether being elected or appointed creates less job security or more job security. You know what I mean? Because I feel like if I'm doing a good job and I'm communicating that effectively to the public, I have pretty good job security. And if you think about if I'm appointed, then I am answering to the 3 county commissioners. And to me, it's a different dynamic. And not to say that whether it's me or somebody else would necessarily do the job differently. It just, as I thought about it in anticipation of being here, it just would feel different to me, because I pay attention, you know, to the reaction of people. I talk to people out in the community about, you know, what do you think about this case? You know, what do you think that was a fair resolution? And you know, people, they'll tell me. And so I value that input. Not that you wouldn't get that if I was hired, but people might feel more like they need to talk to my boss than they need to talk to me. So as far as growth, obviously growth is, I think it just generally is creating a more complex organization in the county. I think the administrative responsibilities, especially at the Board of County Commissioners level, is going to get bigger as the population grows. And so how to make that, you know, where that balance is in terms of growth and the responsibilities, specifically the Board of County Commissioners, I think is a difficult question. I did talk with Jan Bennett, who's the Ada County prosecuting attorney, to ask her about the position that I think has been described as a sort of a COO type position. And apparently that position is fairly new with them, even within the last couple of years. And the position did, I think she said, survive the they're in the same boat as we are with two brand-new county commissioners. So they're maintaining that position. And what she said, I thought, was really important in that she said, you've really got to get the right person for a position like that, because the board can delegate a lot of responsibilities to someone in that position, and ideally a lot of administrative responsibilities. But it's also the person who the board is going to look to when I come to them with my budget request, or the sheriff. And hopefully you have somebody who, the elected officials trust as being an objective sort of evaluator of their requests, and the board trusts to give, objective information, as well as, I think, providing that historical background information that the board may need to really take a look at requests that come to them. And so that sounded good to me, but the challenge is always, and I know you guys are mindful of it, how do you improve things and not spend a ton more money? And that's a position you'd have to pay pretty well. In their situation, they had somebody who had worked in the civil division at Boise City and then in the civil division at Ada County before being hired in this position. So a lot of experience in the administrative side. He was an attorney, obviously. I don't know if I said obviously, but I didn't mean obviously. And so, has a lot of background to be able to provide the board that input. So I think I covered most of the questions. So like Warren, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Phil?
Yeah. Ms. McHugh and Dr. Thank you so much. Really informative, really appreciate it. And let me tell you, appointed, elected, whatever, we couldn't ask more qualified people than the two of you right off the bat.
Thank you.
But I'd like to ask one question, that is, most places, the prosecutor is elected anyway. Coroner's a little different. But does that take the election process, having to run for election every 4 years, whatever, how much does that impact on your ability to actually do the job when election time comes?
I think anybody who gets into the position of running for an office understands that it's at least another part-time job in addition to the responsibilities that you have. And I think it's my responsibility to make sure that that takes place, outside of the workplace, on my own time, and doesn't impact my work. And I can't swear that it doesn't impact it at all, but I think that's the goal, and I think that's the objective of everybody who's running for a public office.
Thank you. Thank you
Sure.
very much.
Kristen?
Thank you very much to both of you for coming. And I know our questions were probably tedious, but I can't fault you a bit in terms of going down that list and giving us the excellent answers. And I do appreciate that you also address the pros and cons, because we haven't really gotten that in the same, perhaps it's the attorney in you, in the same kind of crisp manner, and I do appreciate that. I don't have any questions.
Brian?
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Tamara?
I do, and again, thank you for coming in for all this information. It's been very helpful. When reading through, this is for Coroner Keene, when reading through your statutes in the Constitution, one thing that jumped out to me was that you can actually fill in the position of the sheriff if there is some issue of a conflict of interest. Could you explain that a little more?
It's commonly referred to as the coroner gets to arrest the sheriff.
Okay.
And I think that goes back to our frontier days of, when there were only just so many people available and the less accountability and more corruption. Obviously, that's not something that would probably take place now, but it's still there.
So you actually would have the authority to arrest the sheriff?
Yeah.
Okay. Following up on that, within these two elected positions, do you see that as more of a checks and balances within our current system? And would that even be available if that position, the coroner's position and the sheriff's position, or one or the other, became appointed?
I can't really answer what it would be legally. I think that would come under Barry's jurisdiction of the statute. Appointed, then you may get to a point where someone is gonna say, in other jurisdictions, the sheriff and the coroner are commingled. It's one person. And so then you wouldn't have the checks and balances that we have. I think our system is really good with checks and balances because none of the other elected officials can tell me how to run my office, who to autopsy, who not to, but neither can I tell them how to run their office. And so I think that's a very good checks and balance. And yeah, I'd like to have, you know, uncontrolled access to the budget, but it's not that way. And so when the BOCC sets the budget, then it's my responsibility to execute that the best I can.
Kurt?
One of the prior elected officials alluded to concerns about how the credibility of the position might be affected compared to other counties and other legislative roles within the state if their position was to become a hired or appointed position rather than elected. Do either of you have opinions on how your credibility might be affected or your ability to have productive working relationships with other coroners or prosecuting attorneys respectively throughout the state?
Well, as far as the Coroners Association, we have a great working relationship and a state association. We meet twice a year and we're calling on the phone all different kinds of questions and that kind of stuff. In the 5 northern counties, we have a mutual aid agreement for all of the coroners, and I'm the only physician. All the other ones are elected. Many of them are, one of them's law enforcement, the other ones are funeral directors. So the credibility, I think, depends on your ability. And that would be the main thing. If you don't have the ability and the talent, then your credibility with the other coroners is going to go away. I don't think that if you're hired or versus elected, I don't think that makes, in my impression of the association, makes any difference.
Okay. Barry, for the prosecuting attorney?
As far as credibility goes, I guess, you know, if you're doing the job and it's a perception thing for sure. As far as other prosecutors go, I think I would get the question, what are you going to do when you have the board telling you to do something that you don't agree with? And I wouldn't necessarily have an answer to that right away. It would depend on the circumstances, right? And so I think that that's a question that would be raised, that I think someone in my position as somebody who is hired would have to navigate. And so
Okay.
as far as the other elected prosecutors, and they would probably say, how did you let that happen?
Okay, thank you. Apologies to the people online for not having turned my mic on.
Joan?
No questions.
Mike, please. Dave?
Former Commissioner Green brought up an issue with HR, where I guess the county commissioners had a policy, HR policy, that was not adhered to by all the elected officials. And I think at that time, HR person may have been reporting at that time to the Board of County Commissioners. How would that happen? How would that be handled today? So if the county commissioners make the policy, it's their responsibility to make the policy. They provide the HR director with the direction to implement the policy for all county employees. But let's say you or some other elected official didn't agree with it. How would that process work out?
So just by way of example, let's say that the board had a policy regarding escalating, I don't want to say disciplinary action, but I'll use that term. You got a problem, you take this step, then you take the next step, and then you take the next step. It's a graduated application of discipline in order to try to bring an employee, back to where the employer would like it. And that was a policy that was passed by the board. And then an elected official said, well, I'm ignoring that policy. I'm going to do it the way I think is appropriate, and they go ahead. There's really no recourse as far as the board disciplining or, they have persuasive authority, but I think as has been mentioned, where that comes out is the potential that liability may arise from someone who takes action in a manner that is inconsistent with the policy and ultimately may be found to have been inappropriate under the circumstances. So, and as much as the HR director is under, my umbrella, I certainly have no authority to force somebody to utilize a policy that was passed by the board that they don't want to.
And for Dr. Keene, qualifications, we've been very fortunate. I learned tonight that we've had doctors for a long period of time, and it appears that funeral directors are also high on a lot of counties' list of coroners. What would happen if we didn't have that benefit of having a doctor and we had from my understanding is there's no qualification requirement to be a coroner. There is a qualification, I think, to be prosecuting attorney. You need to be attorney in the state of Idaho. So is that a concern that down the road when you decide to retire someday, that we could end up with a coroner that may not be qualified, and the recourse that we would have would be a recall, I guess. And as you know, people need their loved ones to be taken care of in an efficient and effective manner. So I was just wondering about the qualification issue. Is it a problem in your view going down the road or not?
I don't see it as a problem in my particular office because I have a strong work ethic and a dedication to the people so that we get someone qualified when I decide no longer to run. And so those qualifications would remain. Where I would think it would be different is when or if you decide that person needs to be hired, because people can look really good on paper and not be that great of an individual. So that would be where your qualifications were good. The previous coroner had all of the qualifications that I had on the death investigator side, but didn't follow the budget very well.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, are you there? Brian Clary?
So, Tim, that's it, I stepped up. I may have to reset, we have one person on phone on Zoom, and one person on phone regular. I may have to reset the phone system for that person to get in, so let's go ahead and do that now that he's on around once, if that's okay.
Please do.
And I wanted to apologize to the people who are here tonight. I know you're probably having trouble hearing. What we've discovered is our amplifier has gone out. No, we fixed everything, and online volume is great. I know you're not getting the volume here, but.
Do they have the ability to turn on and turn off to mute their system? So sometimes we've got people who are dialed.
Yeah, whoever is dialed in, we are getting, you'll need to mute your phone when you don't want to speak, but I don't know if that's the Zoom person or both people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bruce or.
They may not be able to.
Brian Cleary and Bruce Matari.
One of them
Yes.
should be able to hear.
They may not be able to.
Bruce Matari is here.
Okay. Bruce, then you're the one who's rattling papers.
Or coughing, who's coughing?
No, I had it on mute, but.
Okay, it must have been Brian then.
Then Brian.
Okay, Brian, I'm gonna.
Bruce, while Brian is being cut off and reset, why don't you come in with any questions you have, Bruce?
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you both two gentlemen for showing up tonight. I just have one question. Previous guests have described the county government like a grocery store with each of the departments operating on their own without any real direction from a supervisor. And I was just curious if either of you have had any problems working with other elected officials outside of the VOCC, and do you have any knowledge of any issues in the past with other elected officials not working well together outside of the VOCC?
Yeah, this is Dr. Keene in the coroner's office. In my 2 terms in the county, I have not had any problems with any of the other elected officials working in concert and collaboration. The only time that I get turned down is when I come before the budget.
Well, that's why I excluded the VOCC in that portion.
And this is Barry McHugh. You know, I would say that part of what we do, especially in the civil division, is provide advice and counsel to the various elected officials. And I guess maybe this doesn't really answer the question specifically, but, you know, we'll get into discussions and sometimes debate, sometimes disagreements with elected officials when we're providing legal advice. And so that might not be a great example about that. You know, as far as conflicts between elected officials, and again, I know this is not necessarily with the BOCC, but for instance, you might have somebody come to the board and say, I need this increase in my budget for this purpose, and you'll have another elected official saying, wait a minute, you know, you're asking for a lot of money for employees, and that special treatment of your employees, whereas, you know, in the budget process, everyone is supposed to, you know, get a fair shake. And so you see those kind of conflicts occasionally, again, not with the board, because the board has to decide those questions, but between the elected officials in terms of, you know, finite resources that exist.
Well, that's actually an excellent point, and I guess just from the perspective of working together with the other elected officials, I take it you haven't had any issues or have known of any issues in the past with previous prosecutors working with other elected officials?
Well, this may be a bit afield, but I remember a situation not that long ago where, and this is in Washington, but where a prosecuting attorney sued the county commissioners, I think to remove them from office for some problem that had existed. And I think that's what happened in the end. And so you talk about that to me is kind of the ultimate conflict is, you know, I don't think you either got elected right or you did something wrong in your position. I think it had to do with spending money. And it was I remember it was in the Spokane paper for a while. It was a big dispute.
Interesting. Okay, well, I have no other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brian, are you back? While we're waiting for Brian, Bill, did you have any more questions?
Yeah, let me go a step further, and something, Ms. McEwen, you'd alluded to about the CEO in Ada, which has been brought up here before. And to me, the biggest concern that the different department head would have is their budgets, because that is basically, to a certain extent, out of your control. But, and I mean this respectfully, as professionals, you know what you need. And you see that, well, I need this and this, and it's really important. But two of the commissioners, I don't see the importance of that. Or, now, I don't know how much collaboration there is, say, between the department heads. Do you, when a budget is finalized, to go to the commission? Do you all kind of sit down and discuss it and see who's getting what slice of the pie? And I don't mean that in a curt way at all.
Bruce, you're not on mute.
But,
Somebody's not on mute.
In that light, would some type of intermediary administrator, whether it's a county manager, someone appointed by the three commissioners, or anyone who would kind of get the six of you together and go over what needs to be done and kind of hash out any issues, or is there a way of doing that now that's already being addressed?
That happened back when Cliff Hayes was the clerk. He actually did that, put us into a process of getting together, talking about our, our asks, so to speak, and then trying to work together to come up with a balanced budget to provide to the board. And that was a kind of a challenging process and not one that we were necessarily all familiar with. And so, it took a bit of time. But beyond that, I'm not sure that's time well spent in terms of, let's take your example, you have a chief operating officer and he wants to put all the elected officials into a room and talk about their budget requests. Maybe it would be beneficial from the perspective that I would hear what other people are saying and be able to argue my point. But I think the same benefit would come from a COO who knows what he or she is doing, listening to each of the elected officials individually and then formulating a position to the Board of County Commissioners and explaining why.
I think that is already taking place currently. Clerk Brannon and his Chief Financial Officer, Dina Darrow, have been exceptionally helpful through all of my budget asks, as it were. They will do everything that I need. They have sat down with me and said, okay, this is what you had last year and this is your proposal and how do you want to change it? And so each elected official gets to delegate who they want to come before the board and present their budget. I've done that all of my years just because I'm, personally enthralled with my budget so that I can get what I need to do and where I have a 5-year vision where my office should be and what the county's needs are going to be in 5 years. So I think that that's already occurring with the current staff that we have, and adding another person between me and the board, I don't think would be very advantageous.
Okay, so I follow up on that, or I'll wait. No, go ahead.
No, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, when Mr. Brannon and Ms. Darrow and, I'm sorry, the other woman, I can't think of her name right now.
Jennifer Locke.
Yeah, Jennifer Locke, the three of them were here. They mentioned, I think Ms. Darrow did, about utilizing zero-based budgeting. Now, I've done that before, and it's very challenging, particularly if you're a bureaucrat, to say, okay, I'm going to start over again. Has that been implemented at all, I guess is what I'm asking.
This last year was I think you could call it zero-based budgeting. I mean, although, that was the request, that we look at it from that perspective, and we certainly make a good faith effort, but it's not like I come in and talk to the county commissioners or anybody to explain why I need this amount of money for paper and why I need this amount of money for expert witnesses. Right. It's just my perspective in terms of looking at each line item and making sure I understand why I'm asking for the money.
Thank you.
Before we go, Kristen, go ahead.
And I think the commissioners have kind of made it easier on us because this year they wanted us to justify our expenses, but they still gave us what we had last year and the possibility of a slight increase. So, and I have either the smallest or the second smallest budget in the county, yeah. So it's easy for me to be familiar with each of the line items and definitions. And so having then give me, okay, we're gonna do such and such a raise, we're gonna work on the health insurance, and we're gonna keep your B budget, which is your operational budget, at 1% or 2% increase. I almost didn't have anything else to do because it was that straightforward for me.
Thank you both.
Kristen, let's see if Brian's online yet.
And also, Bob is going to call in. He didn't know the meeting was tonight, I'm to tell you.
Oh.
Bob.
Yeah, I'm listening in now.
Hi, Bob.
Okay, Bob. Well, let's see if Brian's available first, and then we'll go to you. Brian?
This is Brian. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Lovely. The question I have, good evening and thank you for joining, and I appreciate you coming in, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. In prior sessions, I'd asked a question about the potential option of adding additional commissioners that some who've appeared before us previously have noted is something to consider. And, you know, I'm objective about it, and I have a question that goes to it that relates to the open meeting law. My question is, you know, first let me just put out, like under 3 commissioners, a problem that's been described to us is, look, as soon as 2 get together to talk about something of, you know, import to the county, they basically have to have a public meeting. That if you expand it to a 5-commissioner type arrangement, that would facilitate them being able to deliberate without necessarily calling for a public meeting, unless you had 3 or more in the conversation. So, in light of that, and looking at the 5-member commission type form, and thinking also about the public meeting law requirements, in your opinion, is it possible for just 2 of the commissioners to meet without being subject to the open meeting law, then kind of have a meeting of the minds, if you will, on whatever topic they're talking out of import, and then one of them walk across the hall to the other commissioner that they are aligned with or friendly with, and sitting down and having a 2-person meeting with them, and they're not in violation of the public meeting law. Whereas the public meeting law clear enough that kind of manipulation, if you will, is not possible. I'd be interested in your view on that.
Want me to go?
So this is Barry McHugh again. I think that presuming, let's say a 5-member board, what that would allow is for 2 commissioners to be in the same room, perhaps getting information, maybe asking questions, but certainly not discussing the issue that was pending before the full board. So when you talk deliberation, that's what they would not be allowed to do. And even in that scenario where they're getting information, I think that takes away from the whole idea that the concept of the public meeting laws is to make sure that decisions are made with the full knowledge of the public regarding what factors were considered by the board, what information was considered. And so even when a board member gets information outside of a public meeting, you know, we always encourage them to you know, basically say this, you know, I talked to so-and-so, or I got this information and here's what it is, to make sure that, you know, at the end of the day, when people look at a recording of the meeting, they know exactly what information the board had before them and considered in making that decision. So I don't think that a greater number of people necessarily, and shouldn't, allow for the kind of, you know, number one, discussion in relation to deliberation and decision-making, or certainly collaborating with people sort of on the side, to have certainly a preformed majority on any particular issue. And I hope that answers your question.
Well, I think it does in part. Your opinion is basically, look, that kind of finagling, if you will, for lack of a better word, just doesn't seem to be possible within the lines of the existing text of public meeting law. Is that it in a nutshell?
Can you restate your question again? I'm not quite sure I understood.
Well, that kind of finagling where 2 go into a room, discuss, here's what we're thinking, we have a grand idea, yes, we agree, then one of them leaves and goes into the room with another
another commissioner and says, here's the grand idea, and that commissioner says, yes, I agree, and, you're saying, look, under the existing public meeting law, the lines of that text, that's really not something that can happen. They would need to, have that discussion in a public meeting. They couldn't just break it up.
Yeah, I think,
into two.
yeah, I think the language of the law and the spirit of the law is inconsistent with the example you gave.
Okay, that is helpful.
Bob, did you have any questions? Did we lose Bob? Bob is muted.
Yeah, I have no questions at this time.
Okay. Kristen?
The budget keeps coming up, not just with you two gentlemen, but it's kind of been woven through this, it's been a recurring theme here. And I learned something last week that was fairly interesting, and that was that the clerk's office was fortunately able to, and I'm going to use probably not the right term, I know they don't have a pile of money and they're not turning it back in, but for our discussion, they were budgeted funds and they didn't need them. And yet I'm hearing from other officials that there's really a pretty significant need for additional funds. So I'm wondering what type mechanism with our current system you would see that would help those discussions so that maybe some of the funding could be reallocated. So for example, Dr. King, you've got 3.5 people, and we're growing, and at some point I don't know how you would be able to keep up with that. I realize you're not doing the autopsies, you send them to Spokane, is that correct? But still, you mentioned 1,700 deaths that you had to look into. And I'm sure it's the same with your office, that as we grow, as someone said last week, not everybody coming into Kootenai County is coming in because they just want to hang out at the lake. They're bringing their old bad habits with them, and so it's lending itself to perhaps additional crime and additional conflict. So what do you do other than state your case? Is there anything you can do other than state your case?
Well, I think you have to look into your own experience and training, and all of the different organizations that I've been with over the years, and every one of them had a 5-year plan. And so that's when I came in the first year, that was what I did. And all of the commissioners were complaining that they didn't have a 5-year plan. I have a 5-year plan. It just depends on whether I can convince people to spend the kind of money to make my 5-year plan come into fruition. And yes, I have to project how much work my deputies are going to be doing versus how many calls we're going to get and those kind of things. And that's what I do during the budget. I look at it and I go, okay, how busy are my deputies currently? How much more work can they do? When are they going to get exhausted? And that's when I am reaching out to people to see if they have any interest, because it's not going to be that I can hire somebody in 6 months. It's going to be 18 months because I have to go through the budget process to get them approved.
Right.
Now, so far, none of my people have, the asks that I've had have been denied. I don't go in for a full-time equivalent right away because I don't have enough work for them. I bring them in at a half-time rate or a 25-hour-a-week rate and then move them up.
I think convincing the board that you have needs is about everything that you can do, and hopefully they understand your operation and why you have those needs. As far as fund balance, if that's the term that was used, you'll see the board primarily use those for maybe one-time, not reoccurring necessarily expenses, or try to utilize them in that fashion, whether it's building the jail or doing some other big projects, because they don't want to interject that money into a recurring budget need, because next year they won't have that money and then it'll be added to the tax roll.
Bryant?
No questions, thank you.
Tamara?
Actually, a follow-up on Kristen's. I agree that the budget keeps coming up. In your opinions, from both of you, if your positions were determined to become appointed, would they have less control, equal control, more control over their budgets?
Well, from my opinion, the appointed or hired person would probably have less control because they have a supervisor telling them how to run their position. And kind of piggybacking off of the fund balance thing, yeah, if you save the taxpayers' money and it goes back into the general fund, your silo of office, you lose that money and it goes into the cash fund of the commissioners.
I agree, less control because you do have someone who's, supervising your activity. Right now, the board allows us quite a bit of discretion in terms of our B budget. And so if I have a need in a particular area and the need I anticipated in a separate area is not so great, I have the freedom to spend that money. Whereas maybe if I had a supervisor who was really, wanted to control my my activity in terms of the budget, they would have that authority to do so.
So in your opinions, would you see that as a negative on how you would be able to perform your jobs?
Speaking from my position,
Yes.
yes, that would be a negative. Having somebody else have more control over me directing how my budget is spent.
Also, yes.
Kurt? Joan?
Yeah, I'd like to better understand how the whole HR personnel benefit packages work. Are they the same with each of the elected positions? Are they all in the same salary schedule, or is everyone on the same benefit package versus the ones that report directly to the VOCC?
Well, it's my understanding that all of the employees work for the county under the policies and procedures of the board. The only discretion an elected has is they may, for a new hire, they may bring them in under whatever is set. Most of the time it's at the highest you can go is 95% of the market. Most of people bring them in at mid-market type deal. We've had some significant discussions over the last several years about getting all of the employees on the same matrix as like the sheriff's office is on a matrix. Because under certain, if you bring in an individual in your jurisdiction at a lower salary, it's been my experience that they may never get another raise. And so you may have a secretary 1 in the clerk's office and a secretary 2 in my office on 2 different salaries. And Sylvia has just done a fabulous job of getting that reorganized, and so that I think this year everybody will then be on a matrix system where that all the secretaries and all of the different elected officials are paid the same, and they get the same kind of raises and they get the same kind of benefits.
The benefits are basically the same across the county. I think the only thing I can think of right now is that, sworn law enforcement officers have they have a rule of 80 for retirement rather than a rule of 90 for the rest of us. And then Warren's correct in that there is a separate matrix for sworn deputies with the sheriff's office. Then there's a general pay plan for most of the other county employees, and then there's a separate sort of pay plan for attorneys. And I think those are the 3 that are available.
So do all of the elected officials...
Can you turn that mic on, please?
Oh, sorry. Is that better? Do all of the elected officials utilize the full services of the HR department? Because we heard in testimony from someone previously that wasn't necessarily the case.
It's really up to them whether they utilize HR or not. And so, again, that was the reason for including all the elected officials in the selection. And once the selection is made, it's still a question of do we value the work that that HR director and the guidance, you know, that the HR director provides. And Sylvia Proud, who is the HR director, and I think she does a great job. Of course, I'm biased, but I think she's utilized pretty widely across the county because I think she's viewed as being somebody who's objective and fair. But it could be very different. It could be very different with somebody that one of the elected officials loses faith, and they may stop using him.
Thank you.
Leave it on David.
No.
Okay. Bruce? Bruce Matari? Did we lose you, Bruce? Brian Cleary? Any questions?
Yeah, single pass, thanks.
Okay. Bob Fish?
I'm passing.
Back to you, Phil.
I'm good. Thank you both. Really
Christian?
appreciate the
I
information.
just have one follow-up question, I should have been quick enough to ask it. I should have been quick enough to ask this question, when you answered before. You had mentioned that you came in with a 5-year plan. And then it seemed to be that I heard you say that the commissioners don't have a 5-year plan?
That's correct.
Okay. And that is probably because of the nature of them being hired for potentially 2-year increments or 4-year increments.
Well, I guess I'm a planner, and I think planning is important because that's the first way to fail is when you fail to plan. It may change, and that's what my interpretation of the previous boards that I've listened to have said. They said, why have a 5-year plan if in 2 years it's gonna change? And so they haven't done it. And I think all you have to do is sit down in a room and not discuss about policy, but what year is your 5-year plan? They've had a big, I heard Chris Felios talk about the facilities plan that they had and spent a lot of money on and they never did anything with it. But you can still have a meeting and talk about where you want to go, what you want to do, maybe talk about the growth factors in the county, maybe talk about other kinds of things, but you have to have at least a general idea of where you want to go.
Mr. McHugh?
Well, I don't have a 5-year plan.
Okay.
You know, they asked us recently because, and actually they did ask us to provide, I want to say, a 5-year and a 20-year based on the idea that they were going to try to build a new facility, a new building here for additional courtrooms and my office and the public defender's office, among others. And so, you know, I did one then, but I think that we do react to changes in the makeup at the board level. And it can really swing in terms of philosophies from 2 years to the next. And so I can point to trends in terms of number of cases that we're working on and have an idea about where I think I can or should go. But again, you've got to adapt to the changing makeup of the board.
Understand. I guess where I'm coming from, everywhere I've ever worked before, we've always done strategic planning. And I'm seeing that that's something that perhaps county government can't effectively address. But I also think that that's part of the problem that we have in terms of moving forward. And it would actually help use the taxpayers' money more efficiently if there was a plan. I know you had said that perhaps getting together in a budget hearing might not be a good idea, might not be productive, but perhaps people need to think about getting together in some sort of strategic planning. And yes, then the new commissioners who are running for the office might need to talk about what they're going to do in light of that. for or against, but maybe it will get information out to the public in terms of what's really needed. We heard last week, for example, that the purchasing system and the financial system was shaky. And I know that the state at this point has just been introduced a program called Luma for purchasing. I'm sorry, I realize I'm going into a little depth there, but I think there are resources out there, and perhaps it's not the elected positions that are at issue, it's the way it all works together, and that's not our purview, but I think I'm beginning to learn a lot about county government in terms of what the strengths and weaknesses are that you all deal with in order to do your job, so I do appreciate you. That's it.
Thanks.
Wasn't much of a question.
Tamara?
This might be just more of a curious mind, but I saw for the coroner's office that they can pick a coroner's jury.
Yes.
Could you explain what that is?
Well, when you're doing a coroner's inquest, you're then delegating the information that I take to a jury, and then the coroner brings in people to testify about the death of an individual, what they saw, what they heard, what happened, and then the people decide the manner and cause of death. Or if there were criminal activities, then it would get referred to Mr. McHugh.
So the jury would be the jury of the people? It wouldn't be from within house? How would you go about picking them?
I would pick them.
Okay, gotcha.
Kurt?
No questions, thank you.
Joan?
Yeah, just a really quick question. You mentioned that once a month, the elected officials get together for a meeting. Is that with the BOCC, without the BOCC?
That's a public meeting every the third Wednesday of every month.
With
So
the BOCC.
BOCC.
With the BOCC.
It's actually called the BOCC meeting because it's publicly
Okay.
annotated and announced.
Okay, so that's just a discussion about just what's going on day-to-day operations and that type of thing, primarily?
Yeah, it varies depending on which elected official and what subject needs to be discussed.
Got it. And who sets that agenda?
Well, the board sends out an email the week before every meeting asking for agenda items, and generally I've never seen them say no to, I don't think, an agenda item request, so I guess it's, everybody participates in that.
Okay, thanks.
David? No? Bruce? Are you there? Do you have any questions? Brian, are you there? Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I got one follow-up, it's just a question for Mayor McHugh. This is Brian Cleary, and a couple weeks ago, the commission had asked for an opinion on two questions posed to them. I only want to focus on a response to one of them. It had to do with one of the optional forms, whether or not commissioners would be provided under one or more of those forms to be elected by, district versus at large. Do you recall that inquiry at all?
I really don't. I apologize. I don't recall what the discussion was about. I mean, in terms of if there was an opinion that was provided to you.
So apparently there was, but we're not allowed to see it as a policy of the commissioners not to share it. So to me, that's a little curious. And that's not what I want to focus on, but it's curious just because we're considered officials. We ask the question and we can't see the written opinion apparently unless the commissioners change that. But that's not what I want to dwell on. The opinion that did come back as reported to me, just the bottom line was basically, in essence, there's no statute that directly allows for a change for commissioners to be elected by district instead of at large. That would indicate that changing the district election would likely have to be done through legislative means. And to the degree somebody wrote this opinion out, then just in the interest of it being somewhere in the administrative files in the future, I wonder if somebody should revisit that in light of the what is known as the charter form of government, and specifically section 315808. And I might, have something wrong there, but under 5808 sub F, it says the charter shall define the following: date and manner of election, and whether at large or by district. So, I could be off. This is not my specialty in the law, so I can, fully acknowledge I might be misreading something or not have the full context of how these all work together under these chapters. But it just seems like that opinion doesn't quite track with at least the charter form of government option, and that the possibility of electing commissioners on a district-wide basis exists. I can agree with the rest of the opinion that on the other options, it doesn't appear to be, it appears to be at large. But there, in the charter form, which is one of the optional forms, it seems to be, you could put that up for consideration at a district type election for commissioners.
Can you give me that statute again?
Yeah, the charter form, and particularly section 31-5808 sub F. And I'll add, just for context, this is not any faulting or anything of any of your office by any means. This is just, kind of reading this. And also, I know that written opinions, having worked in the U.S. Department of Justice for many years, there are guidance documents that lawyers issue, and then they get in the files and they stay there forever. And sometimes you pick up on one that might have been off, but it's now the policy, so you just can't really revisit it. So in the interest of, just clarity in the record, I just ask you to kind of maybe go check that one out and see if it stands up in light of what I just brought up.
I'll take a look at it.
And Brian, I wonder if maybe the opinion we got back may have taken into consideration the fact that we had largely chosen not to pursue inquiries into a charter form, and when we had talked about.
No, it.
Sorry?
I don't know that we actually made a decision. I mean, we're actually just studying. We never said it was off the table. In fact, I recall saying, look, that could be on the table, although not something that seemed likely, but I also didn't characterize it as something that was off the table.
No, agreed,
Kurt,
but
we've
I
done no
think
deliberations yet. That has not been ruled out.
I understand that. I was pointing at his comment that it was unlikely. That was his comment. He had just admitted to it, and I'm wondering if maybe that was taken into context when we asked for the opinion.
I don't know. Well, because my point that it's a little, I didn't get to see the written opinion, so I don't know. That's why I brought it up.
I would hope and I would think that if somebody on my staff was asked to give an opinion, it would be irrespective of the likelihood of a particular form of government being endorsed or recommended. That shouldn't play into a legal opinion as to whether or not the likelihood of success shouldn't have any impact.
And this is Nancy. Barry, if you'd like to check with me tomorrow, I do believe that Kurt is right. I think we may have said something to the effect of outside of the charter form. Are there any specifics in statute regarding at large versus district? So we can touch base on that.
So it was the way we structured the question, you're saying?
I believe so. We'll double check.
Okay.
I'm not sure that, I don't recall structuring a question one way or the other, but again, it just kind of goes to, and Barry, you know this, I mean, it's like, IRAC issue rule, analysis, conclusion. And so what the issue is posed, because we can't see the written opinion, well, we don't know what the issue was. You might want to go consult that, because we can't look at the written opinion apparently unless the commissioners say so.
Well, I suppose that we could appeal to the commissioners and ask them to release those written opinions too, Brian.
Yeah, Brian, why don't, Nancy, can Brian make a request to see that as an attorney to see that opinion?
I can certainly forward it.
Yeah, in camera works. I mean, that's fine.
With the rest of us don't need to see it, but obviously with your expertise, it might make sense for you to see it and bring it to the issue to us. If that's it,
Any
Brian?
consideration on this, we appreciate it. Thanks, Barry. I didn't mean to take up so much of your time.
No problem. Bob, did you have any questions?
No question.
Okay. Round again. Phil?
Good, I'm good.
Kristen? Bryant? Tamara? Kurt? Joan? David? Bruce?
No.
Brian?
No, thank you.
Bob?
No.
Gentlemen, I think we've run out of questions. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your
Thank you very
expertise.
much.
And if anybody of the commissions want to talk to us individually, you can come in anytime and ask any questions you want.
You're the one person
Thank
we
you.
don't want to talk to again.
I like to talk to you guys, you answer back.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is looking at additional interviews, scheduling. Nancy has given me 2 updates to the report that she gave us last week. We have heard from Lynn Acevedo and from Dan Matos that they will not be participating. We have also scheduled Lori Thomas and Mike McDowell for the 18th. So we have schedules for the 11th, and we now have schedules for the 18th. We do not have schedules beyond that, except for Jill Smith, scheduled for the 1st of September. So the 25th of August is wide open. Also, September is open. So let's take a look, if you will, at the individuals we have been talking about and see who we want to bring in what type of order. I'll open the floor to discussion. Okay.
Who was the last person you said, Dave? I'm sorry.
Certainly. What was the question, sorry?
The last person you were saying, Jill Smith's on September the 1st?
Jill Smith is already scheduled for the 1st of September, yes.
And who was before that was scheduled?
The only other schedule we had was next week, Bob Norris and Bella Kovacs.
Okay.
And I hope I didn't mispronounce his name. And then Lori Thomas and Mike McDowell on the 18th.
Okay, so they're on.
And which 2, David, were not gonna attend?
We have had answers from Lynn Acevedo, the deputy coroner, and Dan Matos, the undersheriff, that they will not be attending.
Okay.
We have not had answers from Art Verheeren, the deputy prosecutor, or Allison Knapp, the deputy assessor. Allison Knapp, I understand, just recently became employed by the county. She may not feel that she wants to participate, I don't know, but we have not heard from her. Art Verheeren, there was some discussion before the meeting with the prosecutor, and he suggested that he doesn't know for certain, but Art may be reluctant to attend also.
So we have the next 2 weeks anyway.
So we have the next 2 weeks scheduled. We don't have the 25th scheduled. We have a very limited schedule on the 1st of September, and that is it that we've got scheduled now. I'd hate to push, but I think we need to start looking at getting out some invitations to people to see who is going to be coming in and when we can schedule them. Or we decide that we have had enough testimony and we're ready to start moving on.
Dave, I think that we talked, and I'm not sure if it was Kristen or requesting that we speak to some of the staff groups, like David Callahan and the current airport director. I don't know if people.
Joan was the one who suggested those,
Okay.
yes.
Then they may be able to get on the calendar if people think that that's the right level of information.
And I think we'd also, Sylvia Proud, who's the HR director, also was one that people wanted
That's
to hear
right,
from.
yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe if we could slot those 3 people in between the 25th and the 1st, obviously depending on their availability.
Okay, we've also heard about Nancy Pluff being a possibility. So let's go over those individuals Steve, how is it pronounced, Kiergaard? Steve Kiergaard, the current airport director. How many want to hear from him? Vote?
Yeah, that'd be good.
I don't really know enough. I'd
Yeah,
like to know how he would be helpful from his position to the discussion.
Are you
Okay,
asking
Joan?
me? Well, he's held the same job in another situation, another government, I should say. And his position is a little bit, the airport's interaction with the county is a little bit different than the normal department because there's grant assurances that the VOCC have to provide fiscally. And I think it would be important for this group to be aware of that because it could, part of the frustration, I think, is with the rapid changeover of commissioners. It's back to 0-1 when a new commissioner is seated to understand that process. And so I think that understanding how that all works could help us make some kind of decision about whether we stay with our current form or move to a different form.
If the airport continues to report to the board, I am not sure how changing either the elected officials to not be elected or changing the number of commissioners would address the concern you just pointed out, though. It
Well-
still seems like whenever you have a new commissioner, they're going to be starting from scratch, regardless.
Well, I think that if the decision of this group is to increase the number of commissioners, there would be perhaps a little more continuity on the board. You would have maybe more staying and fewer being reelected into, whatever that cycle might be. So, I don't know, I just thought it would be interesting to hear from him and David Callahan, because they're very complex departments. And they could have some very insightful discussions, especially in terms of the budget process. So,
Well,
it's up to the board.
We've heard from the budget director about the budget process, and we've heard from several people about the question of continuity. Do you really think either one of them is providing something new in either aspect?
Could I comment on that?
Certainly. This is an open forum. I'm not running it.
And we haven't heard from any department level people, and that was the other.
I don't disagree with that.
So,
No, I'll be honest, we've had some excellent staff people here. I mean, Mr. McCune. I never knew the coroner was so well informed. I really liked him.
I did too.
But I think it's really important to understand the interaction of other groups. How do the cities, which have a different form of government, I mean, Kootenai County operates countywide. And even though they're really primarily for the unincorporated area, so my taxes, distribution of things, all affect me, and I do pay taxes on it. So I'd like to know how they feel about it, because there's a breakdown there, it affects the citizens there, which affects all of the citizens here. And I just think the relationship is really important. Aviation is a very significant department. Planning, development, they're mandated by the state to operate. And I think just to say, well, they're there and they're not elected, they don't count. I think it's just important to know how those appointed people feel. They may say, we think there should be no commission. I don't know, but I'd like to hear what they have to say and where they see any breakdowns. I'm here to learn, not just to render my opinion.
The other benefit, and I can't speak about the airport, from David Callahan's point of view, is that he does get impacted by change of commissioners, but that won't change no matter what we do. But he's worked in other forms of government in different states. And that may be enlightening if there are other forms of government that he found to be more efficient and more effective. I don't know. But that's the only reason that I thought having some people that worked in other cities, in other states, in other counties like he has, may be able to provide a different perspective than people that have worked mainly in Kootenai County.
Further questions or discussions?
I didn't catch the name of the second individual who's going to come on 8/18, so maybe it's the person that I'm going to mention now, but.
I'm sorry, that was Lori Thomas and Mike McDowell.
Okay, no, that wouldn't have been that, okay, Mike McDowell. But I know that Steve Matheson thought that his chief deputy would be of interest to us
That's
because she.
Lori.
That's Lori? Okay, okay,
Oh,
just
is
wanted
that
to make
Jill?
sure,
Sorry,
that's
okay.
what I was saying.
Jill Smith is the current,
I
Lori was
don't
the
know
ex.
the names of these people, so the one that he recommended, because she has worked in other forms of government.
Yeah, I think
is
that's
the
his
one.
current. She's the one scheduled on September 1st.
Okay, okay.
So maybe working on Nancy, Sylvia, Leanna, she's been here a very long time, Leanna Kaiser. Pardon? Sorry, I normally remember. Having more department heads like Nancy, Sylvia, Leanna, we already have Lori and Mike, focus on them first and then see if David or Stephen would be available after them and kind of pull in, so we're kind of still working our way out. I see more dealing with internal first and then expanding that bubble a little bit.
Okay, we have a suggestion that we look at department heads under the Board of County Commissioners, right now, the administration, before we look at those outside in something such as the airport or the Planning and Zoning Commission. Any discussion of that?
Seems like a reasonable approach.
Why don't we schedule so they can come? We don't, we're not sure they're gonna be here, and, I can chew gum and walk, so I think I could deal with two different people.
But I think
Different
Tamara's
opinions.
suggestion that we look at prioritizing them makes sense.
That's fine.
But then stay flexible if we have to.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Of course. We're not going to be looking at Jill Smith until the 1st of September. We're not locked into anything right here, that, well, if she can't come in on the 18th, we're not gonna talk to her.
Right.
And that's the same thing as far as I'm concerned with these others, unless everybody has an objection to doing that. I think flexibility is the key to getting people to come in and talk. But at this point, I believe, unless there's further discussion, do we prioritize the internal department heads over the externals?
What do you classify as external?
The airport director and the David Callahan, the community development.
And why are they external?
They're not department heads working in the administration under the Board of County Commissioners, was the way that I understood Tamara to be
But they work
suggesting
directly
it.
for the board. They work directly
They
for the
report
board.
to the
directly.
BOCC.
They report to the board, but they're not department heads in the administration, I don't believe. They're
So-
kind
so
of separate
You mean
from
the
it.
you mean that you're
Administrative.
separating the administrative, okay. Yeah.
It's, Tamara, I
Yes,
don't
yes,
wanna
no.
speak for you,
Yeah.
but,
No, that's correct.
okay.
So that, it doesn't matter to me.
It
that's-
doesn't matter to me either. I think we're now at a point that, especially once we get all of the elected officials, now we can start to talk to people and put things kind of on the board in columns, and I think we can do that. We just need to hope that people can come in, so whatever flexibility, I like having a plan, but then we need to be as flexible as possible.
Are we
We'll do
talking
that.
about, so we're talking about Nancy, not necessarily in what order, but Nancy, Steve, Sylvia, David Callahan, and who else?
Leanna,
Liana?
Leanna Kaiser, it looks like.
Okay, Leanna Kaiser, okay. So those 5 people, priority would be the ones that are in the administrative group.
Well, let's go over them individually. Then Nancy Pluff, do we want to interview Nancy? She is, according to this, the senior business analyst in the administration.
Well, it might be interesting to hear from her because she's one of the newer hires, I believe. Is that correct, Nancy?
She has been here about 3 years.
6/2018.
Yeah, so
And-
that's newer.
Yeah, and I was gonna remind the group that the ones on that colored list are only the ones you specifically requested. You do have another list that gives you the name of all of the department heads.
Yes,
Yes, thank you.
okay. Further discussion of Nancy? Nancy Pluff?
I would like to hear from her.
Okay, poll, hear from Nancy. Okay, Nancy is in. Sylvia Proud, Human Resources Director, any discussion?
No.
Looks like we've got a poll already. She is in. Leanna Kaiser, BOCC Administrative Supervisor, any discussion? Any questions, anybody? Poll? Okay. Nancy, if you would then try to prioritize Nancy Pluff, Sylvia Proud, and Leanna Kaiser, 25th on.
I think would you like to do those three potentially on the same night?
I think that would be a good
Yeah.
idea. Anybody, any other issues?
No.
Let's try to put those on the same night then. Stephen Kiergaard, David Callahan. Stephen Kiergaard, any discussion? Poll, bring him in. Okay. David Callahan, poll. Okay. Stephen Kiergaard, David Callahan. Nancy, if you could schedule them. Once again, 25th on. It depends on when we can get the others in.
And I think the two of them could come together.
I don't see any issue
And
with the
maybe
two of them
even
coming
team
together.
up with Jill for three visitors on the first,
Okay.
yeah.
We only have one on September 1st currently?
Yeah,
Currently,
yeah, so that may
yes.
be a good idea.
And they could come in, it's my understanding, they could come in on the first with Jill Smith. I think as we move out, it makes sense that we don't have to have just two people. We'll be getting less information, less new information.
Yeah.
And we can bring more people in at a time.
I agree.
Okay. Moving down the list that we have here, the last name that we have, someone who was a prior employee, prior politician, Dan English. I don't know who suggested Dan. Does anybody want to talk for Dan?
I suggest,
And why would we want to hear from Dan?
he was elected official under the, right now under the city of Coeur d'Alene, which is a different form of government. He was the elected clerk under the Kootenai County form of government. So he's served as an elected official under both systems. One where he is similar to one of the line directors here, but in Coeur d'Alene, he serves as a supervisor over a city administrator. So it's a different form of government that he works under there.
Okay, discussion? Any issues, objections? Poll to hear from Dan English?
Yeah, doesn't hurt.
Okay, we have Dan English. Let's work our way down here. Chambers, rotaries, et cetera. I think we're probably wearing out on testimony. Do we have any issues that we want to bring in Chamber of Commerce, Rotary clubs, et cetera?
I'd rather do a public comment session. And if members of those organizations wish to come and participate in the public comment session, so they can.
Sounds good to me. Agreed? Poll? Okay, that's the way we'll do it. Bringing in Coeur d'Alene City, Post Falls City, discussion. And who proposes? Anyone want to speak in defense of it? Kristen?
I've learned a whole lot about the county just through this process. I think I would like to know what the interaction is between the cities and the counties. The cities are growing. The county at some point may become less relevant. So I would just like to understand what the interaction is from their
Okay.
perspective.
So which cities do we want to invite? I believe there are 15 in the county, I heard at one
Oh,
point.
I think we should
I think we
consider
could
the
limit it
larger
to
ones.
perhaps just Coeur d'Alene or Post Falls,
Yeah.
depending on, pick one and go with that.
Yeah.
Well, we did hear some gentleman from Hayden touting how wonderful a job they do in Hayden early in the testimony, so maybe we should.
He was on the-
Yes, but
We've
he was
already
here
heard
because
that
he had
from
been on the 96
Yeah,
commission.
that's his commission.
He wasn't here because he was on the Hayden
I
Council.
know,
now.
I realize.
But he's still getting elected, must tell us something.
So,
We should, if we invite the city folks, we should ask them not to be using this as a platform for campaigning, though, if we can.
I don't disagree at all with that. Any preference, if we do just one city, Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls?
Coeur d'Alene has a city manager form, Post Falls has mayor, I think. They're
Oh.
two different
Yeah.
forms, but they do have a city administrator also. So it's not just how they operate under those forms, and how's that form of government, and their elected official interact with us, with the county.
Okay.
Accountability is what everyone's talking about every night, and that
And
shows
so
me
who would
accountability.
we bring in? Would we bring in the mayor or the council, or would we bring in the admin? I guess that's an open
Oh.
question.
No. The mayor, I think Anna Root, is that the woman's name who is the city administrator in Post Falls? And you have, well, if we're gonna bring in Danny English, maybe we don't need a council person from Coeur d'Alene, but the city administrator, I think would be, provide some input, how his job relates to the elected officials he deals with, and then in turn, how he deals with Kootenai County government, with taxation and different issues that interact between the county and the city.
So would the suggestion be to bring in the city administrator from Coeur d'Alene and the mayor from Post Falls?
Yeah, and, yeah, I think so.
And the reason for that is, how do they function within their governments?
Within their government, and how does that relate to our form here?
So the question would be that in our reform, the question would be whether we're looking at an executive or a manager.
Correct. And what
Okay.
they see is the pluses, they're not here to sell it, tell us what the pluses are, the negatives. And they're open to say, you know, they think that it's good or bad, or they think that 3 commission is better.
Well, of course, they have a different job to do, as we've heard, between cities and counties. They have a whole different remit, so.
Yes, yes.
But it's still accountability governing for the people, whether it's a city form or the county form. And the county form has everything spelled out right here in the state statute.
Right, right.
It's all you can do, what's here and that's all. I'm not sure how important electing someone is if they can't do anything other than what's already spelled out. But I still want to hear them through the process.
So there is a mayor in the city of Coeur d'Alene. It's Mayor Widmeyer.
In the city, there is a city of Coeur d'Alene, yes, but
But I
there's
think
also
they
a city
also have a
manager.
city administrator.
And in Post Falls, there's a mayor, but there's also a city administrator. But they're 2 different forms. One is the council manager form in Coeur d'Alene, and it's the mayor administrator form in Post Falls.
Then what does the mayor do in Coeur d'Alene? If you're saying it's a council/administrator in Coeur d'Alene, what's the mayor do?
Same thing as any council manager form. He is a voting member of the council. He generally will be like the chairperson of the council, but he's not a strong mayor where he can basically veto anything. He can only, you know, be part of the voting group. And it's another person for the public to go to and say, hey, you know, how many times have heard people say, I complained to the mayor?
Right.
And whether it's Coeur d'Alene or Post Falls or wherever, that's what they're there for.
Okay.
Interesting.
So are you possibly suggesting having both mayors and then that other person?
I don't know, Tamara, I don't know that we need both, because if Dan English comes in, he's a councilman on that city, and he can really explain the elected portion of it. The city, the mayor in Post Falls has a very different role. I believe he does have I'm not sure if it's a veto power, but he is a stronger mayor than the one in Coeur d'Alene. So just hearing how they interact, I think, would be important. Do they feel like it represents their people better? You know?
Further discussion before we poll? Poll to bring in the mayor of Post Falls and the city administrator of Coeur d'Alene. In favor? We have 4. That's enough to make a quorum. Okay. Nancy, if you would extend invitations to the mayor of Post Falls and the city administrator of Coeur d'Alene.
Are you ignoring the people online who?
I'm not trying to, but they're not speaking up, so. And since we had 4 here.
I was gonna say 4 out of 9 is not a quorum and normally, but since a couple of them are
I
online,
think
but.
they're having an issue with the online connection.
Okay, that's fine. We'll deal with the in-person, that's fine.
Next on the list is law enforcement police chiefs, Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls. Anyone to speak in favor? Can I assume we can just pass that one then?
Yeah.
Okay. Board of Realtors, anyone to speak in favor?
Same thing, public comment.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
For public.
Let them come in at public comment.
The state representatives, Vito Barbieri, Steve Vick.
I see no purpose. They have a legislative role that has nothing to do with the county.
Well,
Well,
not
except that
necessarily.
the county is an arm of the state legislature. in the
I'm
way
aware
it's
of that, but I think well,
I agree with you that I don't think they'll contribute much, but
yeah.
it's not because they're state legislators. It's just, I mean,
I think I gave you a thumbs up.
Thumbs up to what? Hello?
we can't see you,
I
Brian.
think we just lost you
so,
again.
Yeah, charades won't work.
Okay,
Well,
so,
hold on. I think, what is intriguing to me about them is that they might have information from the legislative
Point of view.
point of view, especially going back to the statutes and all those things, that it's just gonna be a little more enlightening, things that there's statutory, there's notes that happens in legislative sessions that are not privy to the public, but is privy to them. So discussions that they could have had or that they can access historically, now again, it is historically, but I think it'd be interesting to see information that we absolutely can't access, sorry, thank you, that they can bring to the table that could be helpful.
well, we have to understand, neither of them was in office in '96 when the statutes were passed.
No, but they do
So
have
they were not
access to
part of that.
records.
Well, I would see that if, again, once we do the interviews and we start talking among ourselves, there may be questions that come up. When those questions come up, we need follow-up. This is not a one and done. We're gonna have to follow up. And the question is, are we getting enough information to be able to go into a discussion mode? And I think that they would not necessarily help us in the discussion mode. They'd more help us in the follow-up mode if we needed to. So I would not, I'd rather not try to schedule them. Because, and we've never really decided when we thought we'd be done with interviews. But I think we need to look at what is the most valuable use of our time, as well as the time of the elected officials and all. So I mean, again, whatever we vote on, we will, but I don't think this is something necessary right now.
The only issue that I know that they will have is that when they go back into session, they will not be available. So they are only available until basically the end of the year. So even for follow-up or anything else,
I would
it's
hope,
something
I
to
would
keep
hope
in.
to gosh that we would follow up.
Well,
We'd be
phone
ready
call,
to
but they
follow
won't
up
be
before
able to
the
be
end. Yeah.
here. They can't come
Yeah.
here, they're gonna be in session. So follow-up phone calls, yes, but having them sit here and have this type of dynamic, they won't be able to after session starts, which is in January.
Well, I think we just need to poll and decide if, I mean, again, there's two different views, that's okay. It's just, let's just poll and see.
Are we ready to poll? Any further discussion before we do?
Well, and we've got a long time before January. I know it
Okay.
isn't that long, but
Yeah, no, that's fine.
if we bear that in
Since we're
mind.
meeting
putting
weekly,
that-
it is a long time.
Yes, well, it's gonna go fast.
Okay.
I know. I
In
wanna be done
favor
early.
of bringing in either Vito Barbieri, Steve Vick, or both? Yes?
Later. I'll go
Well,
with later.
I'm talking about scheduling for now.
Not in the short term, no.
Okay, opposed?
Oh, I don't know. I agree with Kirk.
Okay.
later.
Yeah, let's.
We'll
wait
leave
and
those
see.
two out for now.
Dave,
And-
did you skip over Rod Beck, Ada County Commissioner?
He did, but I think he may be lumping him with.
I was just
Rod
going
with
down the
Kendra.
list of,
He's on the back of the last page, Joan, if you flip the page.
so I didn't,
Oh, he's
I didn't
right
skip
underneath
over
Board
him,
of
no.
No,
We're not there
it
yet.
depends on which version of the
Yeah.
listing you're
Oh,
looking at.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got him after the Board of Realtors. So
Yeah.
here. Okay,
I did not
Sorry.
deliberately skip over him because on mine, he's
On the
about
back.
6 down still.
got it, okay.
Okay. Russ Brown, Historic Preservation Commission member. Anyone to speak in favor? Poll not to come in? Did you want to say something, Tamara?
No, I think I've talked to him, and he has a pretty in-depth history of Kootenai County. And so maybe from a citizen who's also part of this preservation society, just has maybe a different perspective on Kootenai County and the history of Kootenai County, could be just a different point of view.
Can he come in during public comment? Or do you think that his perspective is substantive enough that we should spend a dedicated period of time with it?
I have no idea.
Okay,
I couldn't answer that.
okay.
Okay. So I will go back to polling then, if there's no further discussion. How many want to bring him in? Russ Brown? Leave him out?
Maybe we can, put him later again, like the others.
We got 0 votes for either one.
Later.
I mean, we can just,
So Russ
it's
Brown-
not like we scratch these all off
Right.
forever.
Russ Brown, at this point, we will not be inviting in.
Yeah.
We have an unnamed tribe representative, Coeur d'Alene Tribe. Anyone feel that we need?
I'm the one who brought that up, I think.
Okay. Do you want to speak in favor of bringing in a tribal
Well, I
representative?
mean, it's a big segment of Kootenai County. I've attended meetings of the planning development. They usually always have a representative here, and I don't know how much of an impact they have, but they do get to vote for all our commissioners, and I just feel like their input is probably important to at least hear how they feel about how they feel represented.
I think I would agree with that because of the fact that they are involved in county government and they're involved in things that affect their constituents. And it's a kind of a interesting relationship between the tribe and the county and hearing what they think is working and not working and what they think changes could either help or hurt would be, I think, advantageous.
Further discussion? In favor of bringing in a tribal representative? Yeah. Okay.
If you need a name, Cash Matheson is the one who usually attends. I'll write his name down.
Nancy? Okay. We move down to Jim Hammond, former city administrator, former mayor, former Idaho senator, and 2021 mayoral candidate. I don't know who brought his name up. Anyone speaking in favor? Any discussion at all?
A little bit political, I think.
Okay. In favor of bringing him in? In favor of leaving him off?
Yeah.
Okay, Jim Hammond is gone. Department heads, that's what we were talking about with the 3 that we've already named. So I don't think, unless we have somebody who wants to talk about or actually 5 we've named. Any department heads that are not among the 5 we've named that we need to bring in? I presume you're trying to decide, Tamara?
Looking through, I think we've covered a lot of these just by the elected officials. It would,
And we have the 5 department heads that we're talking about.
correct. Yeah, at this point.
Okay. Idaho Association of Counties, asking for a representative. I believe, have you been talking with them?
I have not.
No. Okay.
I've been spending my energy, you might say, looking external to Idaho at the moment.
Okay.
I figure if I understand more about that, then I can pull it back and have a more reasonable discussion with someone.
Okay. Anyone speaking in favor of the Idaho Association of Counties?
What would they be?
I don't know, I don't know why they would add anything new to us.
I didn't put the name on there, I don't know.
What is their, I'm showing my ignorance, I don't even know what their role is.
I think it's a group of the county, I mean, it's the Idaho counties kind of constituency
So
group.
for the representing the 44 counties.
They get together. I mean, they run trainings, they run meetings. I heard 1 or 2 of the county commissioners refer to periodic, once or twice a year, meetings that are put on by IC where there's opportunities for training people and collaborating across county boundaries.
So theoretically, they would have a fairly good understanding of the other 44 counties and how they function.
Presumably, yeah.
Well, that might be interesting.
Well, we know the other 44 counties.
Right.
They have exactly the
They
same
have the
structure
same
we have
Yeah.
now.
structure we have, so
So-
that doesn't
Is
necessarily
Ada
help
the
us.
only one that has the COO? There's not
Ada
any
is
other?
still 3 commissioners and
Right, but
6
they have a
elected
COO.
officials.
Yes, but
Yeah,
the
but that's-
COO is not a statutory
It's
position.
just a role that
Right.
reports to the board. So, I think Ada was raised as a roughly comparable county in terms of growth profile, somebody pointed out, Metro is a higher percentage of their populace than ours, but
They have about a 3% higher growth rate than we do.
yeah. So,
Because it's the
And it's-
urban environment.
urban, yeah, right,
Boise's in the Ada County.
yeah.
Okay, so we're not looking at bringing in Idaho Association of Counties representative, is that,
Yeah.
okay?
Sure.
Okay, Ada County Commissioners, we have Kendra Kenyon, who was elected in 2018, and Rod Beck, who was elected just this last year.
I think it would be great to schedule them both for a Zoom call in one night, and we can talk to both of them.
Can I make,
Mm-hmm.
can I make a comment?
Certainly.
Let me ask, why would we want Ada County here? All our commissioners and our department heads not competent enough to tell us what's going on? The only difference between us and Ada County is about 500 miles, I think. And they do have an administrative officer that several of the people have talked about. But I don't see any benefit just bringing another county in because it's where Boise is. And Boise actually has the council manager form of government. And it has 2/3 of the population. So, and I'll be honest too, a little bit what I read about one of the county commissioners, some problems going on. It's none of my business, but I just feel like we get the information we need on how a commission form of government runs based on the staff we have. So far, the people have talked, I thought were excellent. Very knowledgeable, professional, and I don't need to go down to Ada to ask for an opinion.
Yeah, I think the only reason that they were even considered was not about learning how they operate, except for the COO.
Yeah.
If we think there's a value, we've heard different views about how it works and how it can help and maybe be a disadvantage. But that's all hypothetical because we don't have it.
Right.
They actually have had it for a couple of years, and one of the commissioners has been there prior to it, and one has been there post to it. So if we do decide to have them, it would only be really more focused, I thought, on the COO. If we don't think that's a value, then probably you are right. It's probably not valuable.
Actually, we did have that here. We had
Yes.
Tom Taggart come in and
Right.
talk to us, and he had the same position, basically, just a different title.
I think another perspective too is that it's not a structural difference. So our commissioners could decide that they want that. They
Correct.
don't need us.
That's correct.
So.
But it's also something.
And we have that, I'm sorry, and we also have that person's position description. So it was distributed to all of us. So we kind of get an idea. That could be handed off to the commissioners if we would determine as a group that there should be no change. I'm not sure how having that person talk to us would, since that is not built in to any kind of structural change, I don't know how that would benefit.
But our role is to decide if we should recommend a structural change. And if the problem that is being dealt with is a lack of efficiency, just hypothetically, not saying that's the exclusive one, but let's say we're focused on a lack of efficiency. If efficiency can be gained without a structural change, that seems to be a better option than instituting a structural change, to me. And so the only reason to explore that is to understand whether that can bring benefits that can be gained and maybe address some of the concerns that led to the formation of this group without having a structural change.
I don't agree.
Well, I think
So
the
I
other,
have a question.
sorry, go ahead,
Sorry.
Jen.
I have a question. So, Kristen, you're doing a study of other county governments out
Counties,
there,
yes.
other counties. I think I would rather hear that report than hear from Ada at this point.
Well, we will hear the report. It's not an either or.
Well, I know, but in terms of our timeframes. So,
Well, one of the other benefits for Ada is it keeps coming up about our growth and the issues with our growth and how are we able to handle our growth and the problems that could be perceived with our growth. They are a larger county. Yes, some of the demographics are different, but they are a larger county by a large percentage, and they have a higher growth rate than we do consistently. So they theoretically, if there are issues, should be encountering what those issues are. So.
But you have to take into consideration, the majority of their population is urban,
Right.
not county.
Right.
Therefore, it's a completely different animal when you talk about our growth rate versus theirs. We have a rural growth, they have an urban growth.
Yeah, but I think there'll still be crossover. And I think at some point too, we do have, I mean, if you look at Hayden and you look at Post Falls and you look at Coeur d'Alene, the building that's going on, we are having a large urban growth here too.
And I don't
So-
disagree, we shouldn't have a 20-year plan, but
It's just, it's.
we've already
apparently
heard we
for-
don't even get a 5-year
Yeah,
plan.
we don't get
Yeah.
5-year plans, right.
I don't know.
I think you're going to speak to what you both mentioned. I've been talking to talking to counties, North Dakota, South Dakota, and I've started North Carolina. And in particular, I'm starting with those counties where the population dynamics are pretty similar to ours, combination of rural, urban. They're areas that are beginning to grow fast, areas that have a resort type or attraction, so that people are coming in from the outside, so that has to be dealt with in terms of what the sheriff and others would deal with. So I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to find things that are equivalent. Given enough time, then I can branch out and throw others in, because I don't want anyone to necessarily accuse me of cherry picking these. But I think you'll see when you look at the size of the county, the size of the cities. So if you take Post Falls, Hayden, and Coeur d'Alene, and you kind of roll that together, what that number is, I think you're going to see that these are some counties that are facing equivalent things. And I also want you to know, as a preview of coming attractions, they all have not decided on the same thing. So if you're assuming that these are all going to be X number of commissioners with, no one elected and a strong, that is not the case at all. I am not hearing that. So I would hope that when I do present, you'll see that there are some paths out there that people have taken that step and they're happy with the step they've taken. It doesn't bother me that we might be the first county to make a change, but it also doesn't bother me that we would be a county that looked at it and said, no, we're not making a change. It's going to be a decision from the group. I don't have
Kristen, with that being said, why don't you include Ada County in your research?
I sure could.
And bring that, I think it would be a more productive use of our time so that you're presenting it in conjunction.
If you would like me to, I would add, it's gonna be kind of an outlier there in terms of what it looks like in terms of the numbers, but that's a good point.
Yeah, well, that seems like a reasonable balance.
So what I've been doing is I'm not only I'm identifying the counties, but then I'm reaching out to people in those counties to talk about what the history was, what they went through to get to the system that they've got now, how they think it works or doesn't work. I mean, we have some pretty interesting discussions. I've met some pretty incredible people around the country.
Are you?
So I want to thank.
Are you also looking at the legislative constraints that they have to operate within for their structure?
Yes, and some of them, there are a number I'll just throw this out too, there are a number that don't have the whole district court issue that we have in this state. So nothing's,
Nothing's exactly the same.
nothing's exactly the same. I think that's what's fun about it.
Fun.
Glad you're having fun with it.
I am.
I
That's what I would use.
Right up her alley.
I'm talking to some wonderful people and having a great time. I've got friends all over
All over the country.
all over the country
All
now.
kinds of resort counties you can go visit now.
And actually, like, as I told my husband, I'm also, if it doesn't work out for us here, well, I'm picking some pretty good counties, other places in the US, but this is, I'm being facetious about that because I love being here and this is where I want to be, but there are some nice people out there. Backup
Okay,
plans.
so the suggestion now is that we move Kendra and Rod Beck into the report that will be presented by Kristen.
Right.
So we exclude them from a special invitation?
That works.
Yeah.
Okay. At my count, that is 12 people that we have invited. There's Marky McBriar, Associate Professor of Politics at U of I, is the last one on the list.
Brian actually had her on the list, and he's taken her off the list.
Brian has taken her off the
Because
list.
there's a video of her presenting something to someplace.
County Democrats.
You better not repeat the name of
invited her
it.
as a guest about a year ago or
Yeah.
less than that. Actually to talk about forms of government when the word of the study commission was floating around originally. And so she came and spoke, and her remarks were fairly general. And I think you could just go look at that video and get just as much as having her on a Zoom call. I don't think you're gonna come up with much more original, but that's up to you guys to decide. I just think, given the number of people we gotta deal with, I think we could just as soon go look at the Kootenai County Democrats video.
That recommendation makes sense.
So,
Yeah, that'll draw a crowd.
maybe you guys could give us a book report, I don't know.
Okay.
It looks like we have agreement that Marky McBriar will just deal with the video.
Right.
Okay? That gives us 12 people that we're talking about bringing in. If we can get them in at 3 per week, that would be 4 weeks. Let's assume we can't do that. Let's say we've got at least 5 weeks' worth of people scheduled. That it would be August 11th, 18th, 25th, September 1st, and 8th. Do we have any issues, discussion on that?
Dave, I think at one point to bring up here for consideration.
Yes.
You know, I'm on board with the people you've lined out and bringing them in if possible. You know, throughout this, I've heard numerous people speak of I don't know, insurance association that insures the county and things like that. And of course, you know, the structure of government may indeed have an impact on what your insurance ratings are. I wonder whether there's some easily obtainable representative that works with the county on insurance issues who might come in and be pestered by us for some thoughts on forms of government and how insurance companies view it, because I think that probably has some influence on how insurance companies go about rating a county for insurance purposes. So, you know, we've heard some examples brought up, I think from the commissioners. I don't know how, you know, valid it is or not, but, you know, about like the sheriff and the way things are structured and how that affects insurance. I think I've heard stuff like that. I'm not dreaming it. So maybe hearing from some knowledgeable insurance person might be of value, because any recommendation that we contemplate here probably should have that in mind.
Nancy, I believe I've been told we're self-insured, is that correct?
Well, we are self-insured, but that's for health insurance. If you wanted to consider this, we are insured through the Idaho County's Risk Management Program, ICRIMP. Our local insurance representative, however, is John Getty, who is also a former member of the Idaho State Senate. So he would have the insurance, and he might be able to answer some other questions you had talked about with representation at the state level as well.
Could we start with a question to him whether this would actually impact insurance rates? And if he says yes, then we can talk about bringing him in. If he says no, then it becomes a moot point.
What if he says, I don't know?
Then
there's probably no point in bringing him in, because if he's gonna sit here and tell us he doesn't know, then
we don't gain anything.
Yeah,
either.
Yeah, agreed.
So unless he says, yes, it will impact, and he can tell us how, then we won't be bringing him in.
Perfect. He has done this a long time. He should be able to answer that question.
Okay. So, getting back to the scheduling, we look like we're scheduled through the 8th at this point. Let's assume that we lose a day in being unable to get people in 3 on a night. Figure that we've got through the 15th scheduled. We have been talking about public comment and scheduling that as part of this discussion tonight. It looks to me like on a preliminary basis, until we find out exactly how things are going to be going, we can look at the 22nd, I didn't mean 28th, 22nd and 29th for possible public comment.
Maybe do the 29th so we can make sure that we accommodate everybody, and then there'd be no question about canceling.
I don't know that we're going to be looking at a cancellation. If anything, it would be shortening it perhaps.
Okay.
If we actually have one person that's going to come in and testify, we can still have public comment the same night.
I would rather just have a public comment.
I think it's a lot easier to do
Yeah,
a
and-
dedicated meeting to
And
it.
I think that if we tell Nancy that if the 29th is the day, that don't schedule anybody for the 29th, I think we could work around it. And that way, the public knows a set date, and then we need to start working on an explanation to what it means. So is it 3 minutes per comment? Is written comments allowed? Whatever those rules are, so everybody knows if we're gonna start at 5:30, does it end at 7:30? Does it end at 8:30? What happens if we have too many people here and they can't get it done by the end time? Do we agree to have another public comment later on in another couple of months or whatever else? I think just has to come up with some rules so everybody starts knowing when we start the public comment, how it's gonna be administered by the chair.
I agree that the rules of engagement, so to speak, are key.
Okay?
But I do think picking a date and then just sticking to it is best, because this will be publicized presumably through the paper and who knows what else.
Well, we got plenty of time before that, so.
Yeah.
What I would like to suggest then is a soft 22nd and a firm 29th for public comment.
I think it'd be a lot better if we just picked one and stuck to it. We could pick the 22nd and then schedule around it, just like Dave suggested. If for some reason somebody has to slip out, they'll have to come in after the public comment.
Further discussion?
Yeah. 22nd?
Or make it the 29th and
Yeah.
give us
A buffer?
You think we need a week off?
I wouldn't
I heard
mind, I
Nancy
wouldn't
get
mind
that.
that, and maybe it'll help Kristen get her
Honestly-
report done.
I mean, maybe no one else needs time,
No,
but I'm
I-
gonna have to pull together a whole lot of data and do a presentation, so I need to.
I do
fit
think,
at some
I think
point.
that's a great point, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I
So
think.
we're going to schedule a report on the 22nd and public comment on the 29th?
Oh.
Oh, no.
Maybe we'll let Kristen do her report in the first meeting of October or something,
Yeah. But
if that's not too soon.
if we can just agree on the date.
Well, once we finish testimony, then it's gone to deliberations, so we would have to have the report before we begin deliberations.
Right, that'd be the goal.
So
It
are
won't
we
make much
saying,
sense to deliberate for 3 weeks and then get the report afterward.
no.
Was this August 22nd or September?
We're
September.
talking
September 22nd, 29th.
So Kristen's suggestion is we take the 22nd off, let her have more preparation,
Unless we have to.
unless we have somebody
testimony.
scheduled,
Yeah.
testimony, and then the public comments on the 29th.
Yeah.
I like it.
Any objections? I'll ask it that way.
Well,
Go
I
ahead.
don't really have an objection. I mean, it is Halloween, so people with kids are close to it. I don't know if that factors in, but.
September
That's
29th
September,
is
not
not that
October.
close to Halloween.
That's a month ahead.
Sorry. Anyway,
Month ahead there, Brian.
all getting ready for Halloween, I guess.
All right, so we're agreeing.
Yeah, I was at the store, the candy was already out, so.
Just bring the candy, that's all I want is the candy. So September 29th will be the public comment, September 22nd is preliminarily an off week. Is that?
Unless we have
Unless-
Facebook
unless-
somebody
Get a
in.
And then
report together if
Nancy
somebody
will-
else wants to come in at
Yeah.
that point.
And then Nancy has the
It's-
12 people she'll try to schedule, and then we'll know more next week.
Right. Nancy can schedule those, I believe,
Yeah.
the 25th of August through the 22nd of September.
Well, I'm going to throw a little glitch in there because
Throw it away.
I'm glad we were talking about this. It dawned on me as that question came up from Bryant about which month. August 25th is the BOCC public hearing for the budget.
Oh,
So this room is booked that night.
okay.
Okay.
So that's our week off.
That's 1 week off.
That would work.
That'd work, we'll take that one
Yeah.
off.
Take that week off.
Go.
As someone who's working that budget public hearing, I thank you. My only other question to this group, further up on that list, we did have a note you had me put in there earlier about Tom Taggart because his testimony was stifled due to technical issues. Was that someone you had an interest in hearing more from because of his position as the administrator previously?
Comments?
No, I think we were able to glean. He was pretty clear, we could hear him.
With what we heard from Tom at the time and what we've heard from other people, I think we're pretty much there.
I would agree.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay,
Okay, so we're now taking the
so the
25th.
25th is a dark week.
25th of August, okay.
25th of August is a dark week.
And it was
So that brings us, the 18th, we had Lori Thomas and Mike McDowell.
Yep.
We had, the 25th is dark. The first, we currently have Jill Smith, Chief Deputy Treasurer. And then we have the other 12, actually the other 11 that we're talking about that can be scheduled in September 1st through 22nd.
Right.
Okay? If any of them are unable to make it during the month of September, are we fixated on any of them?
Let's see who we miss, and then we can decide as we go. By the time we get to the 22nd, we'll have a much better picture.
I think we'll have a fairly complete one, but we'll see.
So when's your report, dear?
She was just asking when your report was.
I'm not yet committing. But it sounds like I have one free night to work on it.
Exactly.
If we can try to work it in somewhere in September, very 1st of October.
Yeah,
That would be the time frame I would anticipate.
makes sense.
Agreed, everyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we want to spend any time now talking about the rules for the public comment session? Do we want to defer that till closer to that time period?
I think the earlier we can get something, I mean, we could either discuss it, if you can give some ideas, we could draft something that we could review, so we could, recap, like for example, 3 minutes.
I think what you spelled out
Yeah.
is a reasonable starting point.
I mean, so you have 3 minutes per speaker is what, I think the airports use 3 minutes, the planning commission could use 3 to 5 minutes, so something in that neighborhood. How long do we want it to?
How about a 2-hour limit? We start at 5:30, we do a little bit of business, we then open up for public comment. Public comment would end somewhere around 7:45, 8 o'clock.
Why don't we say 8 o'clock?
8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay, so 5:30 to 8 PM.
Well, it wouldn't be exactly 5:30, because
Well,
we'll
I
start
mean,
with
but
business, but yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we'd have ending business too.
Just,
Um,
if we're good about it, all we need to do is adjourn.
yeah, I think what we'd probably do is just do the pledge, we do the agenda, we do the minutes approval, and then
Go
go
into
into
it.
public.
Go into public comment, and then just, when
period,
comment is ended,
and
we
then
just adjourn.
Yep.
What about online?
I think,
part of that
I think written comments should certainly be taken. We take written comments now,
Yes.
Right.
so that's not an issue. I think
and
online, we need to be able to support online, Nancy, I believe. So now how we intersperse in-person versus online, I don't know, maybe we just alternate back and forth.
Right, and we probably will have a card or a form or some document here, if people want to just fill it out and then don't want to talk. So there's a way, the way to do this is you got to have people say who want to talk, but some people may just want to fill out a card and just leave it here in a box somewhere.
Maybe we can borrow the number ticker from the DMV and they can take numbers.
Yeah, right. Well,
Well,
yeah.
maybe they've got it stashed in a closet then.
Then what we just say is take a number, and we don't have any number ticker around.
Number 67.
And then the other thing I think to consider is that we don't engage
No.
with anyone or
No,
answer
this
any
is public
question.
comment. This
It's
is not
just the
question and
comments. We
answer. This
don't
is not
say
engagement.
anything.
Right,
This
that's a
is
good
public
point.
comment.
Okay, so
I do think we'll want to set the tables up more in a line.
Yeah.
I don't think we can get 12 chairs up on the dais, but we do want to line
We'll
up.
set up in front of it here
Yeah.
somehow. All of us facing out.
Yeah.
so it's a comment, not discussion meeting. Okay,
Will we need the people, because I know Vlad and I don't remember who did it in the past, but have the whole red, green.
I think that's very helpful.
I
Yes.
think it's a visual.
Yes, we'll have to have the timekeeper.
And the board of commissioners might have those forms, Dave. 'cause
oh,
I
yeah,
don't
they
remember.
do, we have them, everybody uses virtually the same type of thing. And,
Now, at the airport, we've had occasion where an individual wanted to speak for a group of people from one organization, and in that case, we did allow an additional amount of time to speak.
That's true.
Actually, I'm opposed to that. I believe each person that wants to come speak has the same validity of coming and speaking, no matter what their title is or what their association is. I think everybody has the same validity.
Yeah.
So keep them all at the 3 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
If we
Like
decide that
always, spouse.
if between now and then we have to make it 4 minutes for everybody, but I think it should be the same for everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's.
Yeah, I agree with
That's
that.
really good. I think 3 can kind of go
Is this
quickly.
Go ahead, what?
Was this a 2.5-hour slot?
Yes, 5:30 to 8.
And assuming it was 3 minutes, and also assuming that I can do math, that would accommodate about 60 people who could comment.
Sounds about right.
Yep, about right.
Plus all the written.
Well, you don't have to necessarily read the written out.
No.
No.
You don't, you actually,
We wouldn't read
Yeah.
it.
Spell their name, put a written comment in, and then it's public record.
Yeah.
And we can read them out, so I don't have an opposition to that.
Depends on how many people want to speak.
That's true.
yeah,
I would suggest that we plan on just having speakers, but if there's not enough speakers to fill out the time, we can read out written comments.
We could also adjourn early.
I don't know if we
No.
have to put a time on it. I think we have to be here for that.
Yeah.
time.
Okay, all right.
okay,
Because
so
if someone
speakers
expects to
are,
come in at
speakers
8:40,
have
at
priority,
7:45
written
and
comment
speak,
second.
we can't be
That's
gone.
fair.
Yeah.
So when we're at the end time, if there are still people who want to speak,
We
it's
basically-
first come,
Sorry.
first-
Yeah, we basically say that, we published the time. We're sorry that we could not accommodate everybody. We do want written comments, and we will have another public comment period and obviously a public hearing at some point on that. But that's why it's important up front to make sure that everybody respect their fellow citizen by trying to keep it to 3 minutes. It's hard
Yeah.
to do that, but hopefully we'll be able to accommodate that.
And I think the other thing is that if we have an overwhelming degree of participation and it's clear that we've got enough to fill up another night, we always have the option of scheduling a
Yeah.
meeting the next week for continued public comment.
Yeah,
The first week of October.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think Nancy's coming.
One thing I will,
I have sorry, am I speaking over someone?
Nancy was just sneaking out of the back room to talk here.
I was just gonna suggest one other thing to think about. We've had, especially when you're doing limited meeting times, one issue we've had in the past is you'll have someone, I showed up at 3 p.m, I sat in my seat, I wasn't one of the commenters you picked, and at 8:30 you shut down the meeting. So thinking about a process for, how to take those, or if that matters to you about taking them in order. One of the things we did at one of our larger meetings was we actually had limited chairs and we had people line up standing on tape. And after they gave their comment, they agreed to leave the room so we could bring more people in, so they sort of knew where they were in line. We've also had it where we've asked them if they wanted to speak to turn it in at the door, kept them, in a stack, so they would be taken in that order. Or maybe you announce up front and say, we will just do our best, but we can't guarantee if you are here at 3 p.m. that you will, have the opportunity to speak. So just something to think about.
I think it makes sense to try and find some way of showing people that if they were here first, they get first chance to speak. But,
Dave's ticket idea is a good one. Like, come and take a ticket, and you just calculate 3 minutes per ticket, and any person that you could just look at their ticket number and go times 3 and look at their watch and go, that's when I'm up. That seems pretty reasonable. And that way, they don't have to pre-sign up on a list where some might be hesitant to want to write their name down on a list. So instead, just take a number. I don't know how you do that virtually, but certainly in person, you could do it.
But it's my understanding that anyone who's
Maybe you
making
give them
comment
those
must
signs
identify
that says, "Now
themselves.
serving."
Right. So I think a good way to handle this, and at least this is what we did at the airport, is we had a sign-in sheet for everyone. They have to they had to state their name, and their address, and.
Basically, his
and
name and address was.
Name
two
and
things
address,
for
I think
public
is what
record.
it was, and then we just started at the top of that list and went straight down. So that way, whoever signed in first was the first speaker, whoever signed in second was the second speaker, and there's no confusion that way.
What happens as people come in? So
They
we have
continue to sign
somebody
in.
there to monitor and then keep handing the papers to.
Yeah,
the
if you've
people
got
for
20
their-
names on a sheet, then the
Right.
first 20 get handed off.
Right.
As soon as the sheet's filled,
Yeah.
it's submitted,
Yeah.
new sheets
Go
are
to the
added.
next one.
And then we always required them when they came to the mic to state their name and their address.
Yeah, that's typical.
And we also required them to speak on a topic, so this would be on this topic.
Yeah.
Type of thing. But Nancy, you must have had a lot of experience with opt-out and other types of public hearings of how to keep the people flowing, so
I have reserved the theater at
Right,
NBC.
right, I know, so.
And that may be talking to, specifically to David Callahan and Leanna Kaiser. Leanna did our Parks and Waterways meeting last year. She did an absolutely
Yeah.
amazing job
So-
organizing that.
How did she do that?
That was the one that they had people stream. She did that in May of 2020.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
And there were several hundred people. If you are going to take comments online as well,
Yeah,
I will absolutely guarantee you will fill the entire public comment time. It would not surprise me to have you do that just with the people in the room, so.
I would prefer to give people in the room priority rather than filling it with people online.
Maybe,
People online can submit an email as a form of comment.
We can also not have an online option. Right now on YouTube, because we cannot archive comments, we do have commenting turned off, so people can watch on YouTube. They cannot participate. If we do not offer a Zoom, it will be an all in-person back the way it was back in 2019 and before that, so.
is there a reason not to stream the public comment session? I mean,
Well, we
oh,
will
you're just
stream it on
saying
YouTube
stream to
regardless.
YouTube only and not do Zoom?
So that's
Okay.
up to you if you want a Zoom component or not.
I think if somebody's made the effort to come down here, sit down here and wait,
Yeah,
they deserve our respect
Yeah.
and our attention, more than somebody who's sitting home in their pajamas saying, oh, by the way, while I'm eating my bowl of ice cream, here's my comment.
yeah.
well, and the other thing too is our audio system is not
The best.
great
Yeah.
when it turned with somebody calling in, so that could be a hindrance.
so it'll be online, but they won't be actually getting comments if they want to
It would be
comment.
streamed,
It'll-
broadcast
right.
only.
But then they would just simply go and send emails
Yeah.
or whatever other mechanism. And we should probably remind people of that when we have the meeting, that here is the email addresses that you could send it to.
Yeah.
Seems fair.
Then for the
Dave,
public hearing.
I'm not sitting at home eating a bowl of ice cream, I assure you.
No, you're working on the Halloween
However,
candy.
I would also note that, many people have disabilities and things of that sort that do preclude them from coming to public meetings, and Zoom and whatever you wanna call it do provide them an option to participate. It's not just all people sitting at home eating bowls of ice cream.
Well,
Thank-
the public
thank you,
hearing,
Brian.
we have to, don't we? There's a difference between the public comment and the public hearing. The public hearing, we have to allow for the online. So we're not saying they can't. I'm asking, is that,
Nancy, is that true? Do we, public comment online required for hearing? No.
oh, it's not? Okay.
The only difference I understand is with a public hearing, we cannot shut down.
We have to wait till everybody.
We have to wait until everyone who wants to speak has had their chance.
So
If
at
that's
some
2 in the
point-
morning, we
It's
can't
2 in the
shut down.
morning.
Or you could adjourn or right word recess.
Yeah, you can take a continuance, basically.
Thank you, continuance.
Can you do a recess and continuance during a public hearing?
I think so.
You can continue, you don't close the public hearing until the comments are over. So you could theoretically have another night now we can't deliberate, we can't do anything. But if it got to a point where, you could stay until 2:00 in the morning, but if that's not, that's an option. But there are other options. But that's public hearing way down the
Yeah,
road.
that's,
Down the road.
well,
Yeah,
to
that-
Brian's point, I think we do need to accommodate
Yeah.
people online. So,
And maybe we ask people, if they're unable to come in let us know through the email, and we could schedule an online night of public comment. That way, we don't need to interleave people who came in person versus people who are online.
I mean, if they're going to email us, they can give us their comment right there.
Yeah, sometimes they want to have,
And frankly, I think it's better if you're making a comment to do it by email than it is to do it verbally, because it ends up in the public record accurately.
yeah.
And I don't know how many of you, I've been misquoted.
So for this particular event on the 29th
29th.
of September, we will not allow public comment from the online source, except for written comments, obviously. For the public hearing, it's a whole nother set of rules, and we'll figure
Yeah,
out.
the
what
public
we-
hearing doesn't matter.
Yeah,
We're just
right,
talking about the
yeah.
29th.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Nancy will work with some of the people who have also to try to figure out the best way to administer the process so people are treated fairly and respectfully.
It sounds like the sign-in sheet approach
Yeah,
would work
yeah.
reasonably well without overly complicating it.
I think Nancy wants to speak.
The only issue with your sign-in sheet you will run into is it will create a backup at the door. And if you take it in the room, you won't have any way to really
Sequence
gauge who
it.
was here first, so just be prepared for that.
And the one thing
Well, if
that
we number the
we did,
pages, when we know that page 1, page 2,
The
page
pro-
3.
The problem is that if you're,
And lines 1 through 20, that will give us an idea of what order they were in.
Maybe as the room fills, what has happened in the past is you'll have a large group of people. Oh, I was looking around, I didn't know where to sign up. I didn't realize there was a sign up.
right,
And so now you end up with a mix of people when they arrived who got to sign up versus didn't. So doing it at the door is usually the best. Now, we could have at least 2 doors open, 2 or 3, and then have, something like 10 signatures per page where each door would have, the ability to, you can get in different lines to sign up or something. We can work through that.
see, another option, Nancy, that we've used in the past is not a sign up, but just the card, the comment
hand them a
card.
number card.
Yeah, so everybody comes in, they get something to fill out, and then the person who fills it out first and puts it in the box or hands it to somebody first is number 1. And then it'll say, do you want to speak or not speak? So when we go through it, we just go to flip the cards over, and we say the person's name, does not willing to speak, is not in favor of it or is in favor? That's for a public hearing again. So there's ways of doing it.
I can email the BOCC's form. We have it where it has check boxes, wishes to speak, doesn't wish to speak,
Right.
and a place on the back to write written comments.
Right, yeah, that's exactly right. But we'll figure out something between now. We have almost 2 months to figure it out, but.
But isn't that more of a hearing?
Yeah, but again, all we're trying to do is figure out how to prioritize people. So the person that comes in and fills out the form first, puts the first, or fills out the card first and puts it into, gives it to
box,
somebody,
yeah.
they become first to be able to speak if they want to speak.
Well, I
But-
think the only way the sign-up sheets would work is if you have one access point.
Yep.
If you have more than one access point to the room, it's going to be a problem.
Well, as Nancy said, we're going to get a pile up of people signing up. It might not be a problem to have 2 access points with people signing up at both access points.
Well, or I was serious about the number ticket machine. If they're still sitting around any place locally and we can get a spool of the numbers, you walk in, it doesn't induce a big delay. You walk in, you take a number,
Yeah,
if you wish to
That
speak.
would work too.
Yeah, you actually just get a roll.
Borrow the
You get a
DMV's
roll of-
numbers.
Yeah, it's true. You don't need the dispenser,
need the
just,
dispenser.
yeah.
Okay, Kurt, we'll get a roll of numbers and you can dispense them.
That'll be your job, Kurt.
Thanks.
David, can I ask one question?
Certainly.
Getting people in here is not a problem, they can sign something, whatever. I just want to know, at 8 o'clock, who's going to sit here and say, we're all going home now, if the room is still filled?
That's our chairman.
How are
That's why you elected
second
me, right?
question, how are you get out?
Well,
We've been
see, what's
very
gonna happen
clear
is,
about
I'm
how
gonna
this
stand over
ends.
there, and I'm gonna make the statement, and you guys run for the door while they attack.
Is there a back exit?
I'm more serious, we get very clear about when it ends.
Yeah.
So people aren't backed up here and going, I mean, they
And-
see a big crowd at 7:45, they can start leaving, and we can realize maybe we need another meeting. But I think we need to consider that as much as how they get in.
And I think that's why we'll know the night it happens. And if Dave reminds people throughout the process please, we're gonna be adjourning at 8 o'clock, so please respect the 3-minute rule. And I think the more you remind people of that, and honestly, if we get to 8 o'clock and there's 3 other people that want to speak, I think we would probably want to have them speak. If it's 300 that want to speak, I think we probably would decide to cut it off.
Yep,
But that, we'll have to find out the day it happens.
yep.
Can
All
we
right.
have some kind of stipulation though, to like Brian was saying, for, 'cause I don't want, and what Nancy was saying with the different modes of communication, that when we put that out, that we are not gonna ignore people who have maybe not the ability to be here, that they will have an opportunity, besides currently, but they will have an opportunity to speak. Because I know every meeting I've gone to, there's always been some, it's usually not many, but there's always been some who, for whatever reason, can't physically come. And I don't think it would be appropriate to, I mean, I agree to your point that the people who come here should get the first priority, but we also need to not ignore a section of society that may physically not be able to be.
Maybe in the announcement of the public meeting notice, you could put something in there that if you need special accommodation, you know, blah, 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 please let us know. And
But we aren't gonna do it that night,
No.
in terms of, we'll have another opportunity for
Yeah,
people.
Unless we
However
only
you-
get 30 people
however
to
you
show up on
address
the
it.
29th,
yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
we're going to probably fill the 2.5 hours on the 29th.
Yeah.
I just don't want to get a lot of negative comments if you ignored everybody online. Why did you ignore everybody online when every other meeting I've gone to, planning and zoning, city councils, BOCC, they have always allowed people online to be able to participate.
That's
So-
true, but right now, we're open to emails right now.
I know. a lot of
Anybody who
people
wants to
want
comment can comment right
Some
this minute.
people like to do it verbally,
They do.
in spite of being misquoted, or the risk of being
Yeah,
misquoted.
They're verbal learners.
I think the important thing is to get it out.
Yes.
That's why this whole thing, it's important to get out what the rules of engagement are
Yes.
for this time. And just try to make sure everybody has the same understanding. And then once that happens, yes, there will be some other things that we may need to adjust that night to accommodate the people. And there'll be other opportunities. That's the big thing.
Okay, to summarize, the rules of engagement as it's been described. The night of September 29th,
door.
2.5 hours, 5:30 to 8 o'clock. In present comments only.
Well, in
Comments are
presence is priority.
Right, well,
Well, we're not gonna
We're not-
enable
we're not gonna
anything
set up,
else,
okay.
so it's not
Okay.
just a priority, it's, yeah.
so as far as verbal comments, present comments only.
Mhm.
No combinations, 3 minutes per person.
Right.
That, is it everybody's understanding of what we've been discussing?
Yep, and we'll have
The
some sort of a
speakers-
queuing system to,
It's to be determined
To be
still, but
determined,
yes,
yeah.
we have to find a way to give people who came here first priority,
Yeah.
okay? I believe we have settled that issue.
Thank
That
you.
was a discussion, but we're satisfied with the results of the discussion for now?
Yep,
Are we ready to adjourn?
you bet.
let's do it.
I'll make a motion to
We have a
adjourn.
motion, we have a second, I believe, Kurt?
Yep.
Vote? Let's go
Yeah.
home.
What time is it?